Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Welcome into the live. This is Trev from Treversence, and this morning we are going to be reading from the book of Nehemiah. But before we get into it, I want to say a very special thank you to all of you who have supported me on my channel. To the newbies, to those who are just discovering my channel, to those of you who have been here from the beginning, and to those of you who have joined a long time, I want to say a very, very special thank you. But if you're just coming into the channel and you've not yet subscribed to the channel, now is a good time to do so. And for those of you who have been here for a while, I want to say thank you for your continued support. Now, this morning, we are going to be reading from the book of Nehemiah. We are reading chapters 8 and 9 and 10. We are going to be reading those 3 chapters before we go over to reading from the book on this foundation, where we are trying to get additional context for the story on this foundation. So guys, come with me and let us continue on this journey. Nehemiah chapter 8. And all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate. And they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had commanded to Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with understanding, upon the first day of the 7th month. So, I believe yesterday when we were talking about the book, the Torah, that the Jews used as their holy book, the book which they consulted for moral guidance. But as I was reflecting on the live we had yesterday and what we were talking about, I figured that, well, the Bible was indeed written before, maybe not the entire Bible, but indeed Moses, the laws that were given to Moses were indeed given before the Torah. And I believe somebody had mentioned that at the time when the people were consulting the Torah, as we were led to believe in the book we were reading, the novel, that the Torah was before the books of Moses. But that could not have been the case if they were consulting the book of Moses. So it is clear that the laws of Moses were indeed written before the Torah. So let us continue. Verse 2 of Nehemiah chapter 8. And Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with understanding, upon the first day of the 7th month. And he read therein before the street that was before the water gate, from the morning until midday, before the men and the women, and those that could understand, and the ears of all the people were attentive unto the book of the law. And Ezra the scribe stood upon the pulpit of wood, which they had made for the purpose, And beside him stood Mattithiah, and Shema, and Ananiah, and Uriah, and Ilkiah, and Maaseiah on his right hand, and on his left hand Pedaiah, and Mishael, and Malchiah, and Hashum, and Hashbadana, Zachariah, and Meshullam. And Ezra opened the book in the sight of all the people, for he was above all the people. And when he opened it, all the people stood up. And Ezra blessed the Lord, the great God, and all the people answered, Amen, Amen, with lifting up their hands. And they bowed their heads and worshipped the Lord with their faces to the ground. Also Jeshua and Bani, and Sherebiah, Jamin, Akub, Shabbatai, Jozabat, Hodijah, Maaseiah, Kelita, Azariah, Hanan, Peliah, and the Levites caused the people to understand the law, and the people stood in their place. So they read in the book of the law of God distinctly, and gave the sense, and caused them to understand the reading. So here these were the men who were interpreting the Bible for the others, so they could understand what was being said. So they read in the book of the law of God distinctly, and gave the sense, and caused them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, which is the Tershathah, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and the Levites that taught the people, said unto all the people, This day is holy unto the Lord your God. Mourn not, nor weep, for all the people wept when they heard the words of the law. Then he said unto them, Go your way, eat the fat, and drink the sweet, and send portions unto them for whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy unto your Lord. Neither be ye sorry, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. So the Levites stilled all the people, saying, Hold your peace, for the day is holy, neither be ye grieved. And all the people went their way to eat, and to drink, and to send portions, and to make great mirth, because they had understood the words that were declared unto them. And on the second day were gathered together the chief of the fathers of all the people, the priests and the Levites, unto Ezra the scribe, even to understand the words of the law. And they found written in the law which the Lord had commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month. Okay, so they found a part of the law that said the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month. What's the significance of that? We don't know yet, but we'll be sure to find out. And that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, Go forth unto the mount, and fetch olive branches, and pine branches, and myrtle branches, and palm branches, and branches of fig trees, to make booths, as it is written. So the people went forth and brought them, and made themselves booths, every one upon the roof of his house, and in their courts, and in the courts of the house of God, and in the street of the water gate, and in the street of the gate of Ephraim. And all the children of And all the congregation of them that were come again out of captivity made booths, and sat under the booths. For since the days of Joshua the son of Nun unto that day had not the children of Israel done so, and there was very great gladness. Also day by day, from the first day unto the last day, he read in the book of the law of God, and they kept the feast 7 days, and on the 8th day was a solemn assembly, according unto the manner. Okay, so in chapter 8 of Nehemiah, we see the people making booths to sit under for this ceremony, because it was written so in the book of Moses. And here the people are, that is their moral compass, whatever law Moses was given. We are moving on to chapter 9. Now, in the 24th day of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting, and with sackcloths and earth upon them. And the seed of Israel separated them from all strangers, and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers. And they stood up in their place, and read in the book of the law of the Lord their God 1/4 part of the day, and another 4th part they confessed and worshipped the Lord their God. Then stood up upon the stairs of the Levites Jeshua and Bani, Kadmiel, Shebaniah, Bonai, Sherebiah, Banai, and Shanani, and cried with a loud voice unto the Lord their God. Then the Levites Jeshua and Kadmiel, Banai, Ashabniah, Sherebiah, Hodijah, Shabaniah, and Pethahiah said, Stand up and bless the Lord your God forever and ever, and blessed be thy glorious name, which is exalted above all things, and praise. Thou, even thou, art Lord alone. Thou hast made heaven, the heaven of heavens, with all their host, the earth, and all things that are therein, the seas, and all that is therein, and thou preservest them all, and the host of heaven worshipeth thee. Good morning, my brother AG. How are you doing? What's going on the roads these days, my brother? So good to see you as always. I hope you're having a great morning and staying safe. Verse 7. Thou art the Lord, the God, who didst choose Abram, and broughtest him forth out of Ur of the Chaldees, and gavest him the name of Abraham, and foundest his heart faithful before thee, and madest. Did they really meant maddest or madest? Oh, because that didn't make sense. Let's go back to verse 8. And foundest his heart faithful before thee, and madest a covenant. Just say made, okay? What in the world are you talking about? But anywho, let us continue. What AG say? Oh, you just got to the ATL? Okay. Is it raining down there? It's been raining here all night. It's been raining the whole night. Is it raining where you're at? Let's continue, guys, until AG answers to me. Let's continue. We are on to verse 8 of chapter 9 of the book of Nehemiah. And foundest his heart faithful before thee, and made a covenant with him to give the land of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, and the Perizzites, and the Jebusites, and the Girgashites, to give it, I say, to his seed, and has performed thy words, for thou art righteous. Oh, no rain. We've been having rain here all night. Verse 9. And did see the affliction of our fathers in Egypt, and hearest their cry by the Red Sea, and shewed signs and wonders unto Pharaoh, and on all his servants, and on all the people of his land. For thou knowest that they dealt proudly against him. So didst thou get thee a name, and it is this day. And thou didst divide the sea before them, so that they went through the midst of the sea on dry land, and their persecutors thou threwest into the deeps, as a stone into the mighty waters. Moreover, guys, I paused here. I wonder why I pause. So listen, I pause here because this is the word that they have here, leddest, and that is supposed to be some kind of a conjugation for the word lead. So we are going to try to read it in modern terms as much as possible, so that we are not lost in the sauce. Moreover, thou led them in the day by a cloudy pillar, and in the night by a pillar of fire, to give them light in the way wherein they should go. Thou came down also upon Mount Sinai, and spoke with them from heaven, and gave them right judgments and true laws, good statutes and commandments, and made known unto them thy holy Sabbath, and command them precepts, statutes, and laws by the hand of Moses thy servant, and gave them bread from heaven for their hunger, and brought forth water for them out of the rocks for their thirst, and promised them that they should go in to possess the land which thou hast sworn to give them. But they and our fathers dealt proudly, and hardened their necks, and hearkened not to thy commandments, and refused to obey, neither were mindful of thy wonders that thou didst among them, but hardened their necks, and in their rebellion appointed a captain to return to their bondage. But thou art a God ready to pardon, gracious and merciful, slow to anger, and of great kindness, and forsake them not. Yea, when they had made them a molten calf, and said, This is thy God that brought thee up out of Egypt, and that wrought great provocations, yet thou in thy manifold mercies forsook it. Oh Lord, help me to read this. Help me to read this in modern terms, and not all this forsookest and those words that we don't even use in this modern day language. Yet thou in thy manifold mercies forsake them not in the wilderness. The pillar of the cloud departed not from them by day, to lead them in the way, neither the pillar of fire by night, to show them light, and the way wherein they should go. Thou gave also thy good spirit to instruct them, and withheld not thy manna from their mouth, and gave them water for their thirst. Yea, 40 years did thou sustain them in the wilderness, so that they lacked nothing. Their clothes waxed not old, and their feet were not swollen. Moreover, you gave them kingdoms and nations, and divided them into corners. So they possessed the land of Sihon, or Sihon, Sihon, and the land and the land of King Heshbon, and the land of Og, king of Bashan. Their children also multiplied. You multiplied their children as the stars of heaven, and brought them into the land concerning which thou hast promised to their fathers that they should go in to possess it. And I know, guys, a lot of us do not understand why there continue to be a land grab in the Middle East around Israel, Palestine, and surrounding areas. Some of us may not understand it because we have never read the Bible and see where it is all coming from the time when the Jews were supposedly promised, all the children of Israel were promised all that land. They still believed that it is theirs. And so the people, if you all remember when we were reading in the book of, I think it was in the book of Leviticus, where Moses, on their journey, when they had emerged out of the wilderness after having left Israel and traveled for the 40 days and for the 40 days and 40 nights, for the 40 years, let's get that right, for the 40 years that they traveled. When they emerged out of the wilderness, Moses said the Lord told him that all the land around that area belonged to them. And so remember, they started wars. And because they were determined to take those lands, because they said their God told them that those lands belong to them. So the lands of the Amorites and Og of Bashan, they were in war because Moses and the children of Israel had seized those lands and warred the people who they found living on those lands, and there was a lot of bloodshed. So the animosity that you see going on right now, there's another flare up of violence between Israel and Palestine. And these things are not new. Been happening from then, and it continues to happen. Let us continue. We are on to verse 24 of the book of Nehemiah, chapter 9. So the children went in and possessed the land, and thou subduest before them the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, and gave them unto their hands with their kings and the people of the land, that they might do with them as they would. So you remember when we read about this in the book of Leviticus and Numbers, that Moses and his people just captured the land. There was a lot of fighting, and they slaughtered the kings and the men, but they took the women and the children with them. Verse 25. And they took strong cities and a fat land, and possessed houses full of all goods, wells that had been dug, vineyards and olive yards, and fruit trees in abundance. So they did eat, and were filled, and became fat, and delighted themselves in thy great goodness. Nevertheless, they were disobedient, and rebelled against thee, and cast their law behind their backs, and slew their prophets, which testified against them, to turn them to thee. And they wrought great provocations. Therefore thou deliverest them into the hand of their enemies, who vexed them, and in the time of their trouble, when they cried unto thee, thou heardest them from heaven, and according to thy manifold mercies, thou gave them saviors, who saved them out of the hand of their enemies. But after they had rest, they did evil again before thee, Therefore, left Therefore thou left them in the hand of their enemies, so that they had the dominion over them. Yet when they returned and cried unto thee, you heard them from heaven, and many times didst thou deliver them according to thy mercies, and testified against them, that thou might bring them again unto the law. Yet they dealt proudly, and hearkened not unto thy commandments, but sinned against thy judgments, which, if a man do, he shall live in them, and withdrew the shoulder, and hardened their neck, and would not hear. Okay, AG says going to check in here. Okay. Or UPS in Atlanta. Okay, my love. Nevertheless, this is verse 31 of chapter 9. Nevertheless, for thy great mercy's sake, thou didst not utterly consume them, nor forsake them, for thou art a gracious and merciful God. Now therefore, our God, the great, the mighty, and the terrible God, who keepeth covenant and mercy, let not all the trouble seem little before thee that hath come upon us, who are our kings, or our princes, and on our priests, and on our prophets, and on our fathers, and on all thy people, since the time of the kings of Assyria unto this day. Howbeit, thou art just in all that is brought upon us, for thou hast done right, but we have done wickedly. Neither have our kings, or princes, or priests, nor our fathers kept thy law, nor hearkened unto thy commandments and thy testimonies, wherewith thou didst testify against them. For they have not served thee in their kingdom, and in thy great goodness that thou hast gave them, and in the large and fat land which thou gave before them, neither turned they from their wicked works. Behold, we are servants this day, and for the land that thou gavest unto our fathers to eat, the fruit thereof, and the good thereof, behold, we are servants in it. And it yields much increase unto the kings whom thou hast set over us, because of our sins. Also, they have dominion over our bodies, and over our cattle, at their pleasure, and we are in great distress. And because of all this, we make a sure covenant, and write it, and our princes, Levites, and priests seal unto it. We are going to move on to chapter 10. Now, those that sealed were Nehemiah. Now, those that sealed were Nehemiah, the Tershathah, the son of Achaliah, and Zidkijah, Zeriah, Azariah, Jeremiah, Pashur, Amariah, Malchijah, Atush, Shebaniah, Malluch, Harim, Merimoth, Obadiah, Daniel, Ginethon, Baruch, Meshullam, Abijah, Mijamin, Maaseiah, Bilgai, Shemaiah. These were the priests, and the Levites, both Jeshua the son of Azaniah, Binnui of the sons of Henadad, Kadmiel, and their brethren Shebaniah, Hodijah, Kelita, Peliah, Anan, Misha, Rahab, Hashabiah, Zakir, Sherebiah, Shabaniah, Hodijah, Benai, Beninu, The chief of the peoples, Parush, Pahath, Moab, Elam, Zethau, Benai, Bani, Asgad, Bebai, Adonijah, Bigvai, Adin, Ater, Hiskijah, Azur, Hodijah, Eshum, Bezai, Harif, Anathoth, Nebai, Hagpiash, Magpiash, Meshulam, Hezer, Meshezabil, Zadok, Jadua, Hosea, Hananiah, Hashub, Haloesh, Peliah, Shobek, Rehum, Hashabna, Messiah, and Ahihah, Hanan, Anan, Maluk, Harim, Baniah, and the rest of the people, the priests, the Levites, the porters, the singers, the Methanims, and all they that had separated themselves from the people of the lands unto the law of God, their wives, their sons, and their daughters, every one having knowledge and having understanding. They clave to their brethren, their nobles, and entered into a curse and into an oath to walk in God's law, which was given by Moses, the servant of God, and to observe and do all the commandments of the Lord our Lord, and his judgments and his statutes. And that we would not give our daughters unto the people of the land, nor take their daughters for our sons. And if the people of the land bring ware of any victuals on the Sabbath day to sell, that we would not buy it of them on the Sabbath or on the holy day, and that we would leave the 7th year and the exactions of every debt. Also we made ordinances for us to charge ourselves yearly with the 3rd part of a shekel for the service of the house of God. So here the children of Israel, they're still making laws and they're still adhering and breaking them. They're still adhering to them and breaking them at will, praying for forgiveness and moving right along to breaking them again. And why is that? Why is that? That is because as humans, there is absolutely no way that as humans, you are never going to be able to, that as humans, you are ever going to be able to not sin, to not transgress these laws. So it's no different now than it was back then, where the people were given all these laws, but they were never able to keep them. They were always transgressing. Let's read verse 32 again. Also we made ordinances for us to charge ourselves yearly with the 3rd part of a shekel for the service of the house of our Lord. So everybody paid. Everybody knew they had to pay. So nobody had to come force them. Nobody had to come take it from them. They knew they paid a 1/3 of a shekel every year for the service of the house of God, for the shewbread, and for the continual meat offering, and for the continual burnt offering, of the Sabbaths, of the new moons, for the set feasts, and for the holy things, and for the sin offerings, to make an atonement for Israel, and for all the work of the house of God. And we cast the lots among the priests, the Levites, and the people for the wood offering, to bring it into the house of our God, after the houses of our fathers, at times appointed year by year, to burn upon the altar of the Lord our God, as it is written in the law, and to bring the first fruits of our ground, and the first fruits of all the fruit of all trees, year by year, unto the house of the Lord. Also the firstborn of our sons and of our cattle, as it is written in the law, and the firstlings of our herds and of our flocks, to bring to the house of our God, upon the priests, unto the priests that minister in the house of the Lord. So that was their moral obligation. Their moral obligation as it pertains to giving to the church was to give the first of everything, the first fruits from their trees each year, the firstborn of each of their flocks, to surrender their firstborn son, give him unto the Lord, not as a sacrifice, but to surrender him to the church. So your firstborn son is supposed to be surrendered to the church to serve, priestly serving they're talking about. And all of them knew that. All of them felt obligated to conform to this requirement as was written in their law. We don't do that now, do we? When people say you got to follow the Bible and what the Bible says. So here is the Bible saying that these people were giving up the first fruit and the firstborn and the first of everything. And they were paying a third of a shekel a year for service in the church. Are we doing that? No, we're not. So does that mean that we are sinning by not doing that? Ask yourselves that question. Verse 37 of chapter 10. And that we should bring the first fruits of our dough and our offerings, and the fruit of all manner of trees, of wine and of oil unto the priest, to the chambers of the house of our God, and the tithes of our ground unto the Levites, that the same Levites might have the tithes in all the cities of our tillage. And the priest, the son of Aaron, shall be with the Levite, when the Levites take tithes. And the Levites shall bring up the tithe of the tithes unto the house of our God, to the chambers, into the treasure house. For the children of Israel and the children of Levi shall bring the offering of the corn, of the new wine, and the oil unto the chambers, which are the vessels of the sanctuary, and the priests that minister, and the porters and the singers, and we will not forsake the house of our God. Now that is the ending of chapter 10 of the book of Nehemiah. Now we have just completed the reading of the book of Nehemiah, chapters 8, 9, and 10, as we seek to get more context for the book that we are reading. When we come back, the book that we are reading called On This Foundation. We are going to be continuing with the reading of the book On This Foundation so that we can get additional context for the book of Nehemiah that's in the Bible and vice versa. So for those of you who were here with us a few days ago, when we read several other chapters from this book, I hope you will be able to put the pieces together. We are on to chapter 20 of the book On This Foundation. So this morning we are going to be reading chapters 20 21 and 22. For those of you who are new here and you don't know what the book is about, well, this is a novel written by Lynn Austin. The book is set in Persia, and it is um it is talking about Nehemiah and his journey from Susa into Jerusalem and being appointed governor by King Artaxerxes, and how he is facing great opposition as he tries to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. Now, let us continue reading. We're going to do chapter 19. I do believe that was. Oh, yes. Chapter 19. The district of Beth Hakerem. The evening meal had been an elaborate, multi-course affair. Nava was weary from a long day of work, serving her master and his distinguished guests. As she had moved in and out of the outdoor dining room, carrying platters and trays of food from the kitchen, she had overheard snatches of their conversation. Enough to learn that the men had come from Jerusalem and that they and Master Malchijah were planning a building project. From the sound of things, it would be an enormous undertaking. You know what that they were talking about? They were talking about how they're going to rebuild the city of Jerusalem. At last, Malchijah and his guests left the table and moved to the upper terrace to enjoy the cool breeze and to sip wine beneath the stars. Nava grabbed a tray and hurried out to clear the table, hoping to finally go to bed. She nearly halted and ran back to the kitchen when she saw that Master Aaron hadn't left the table with the others. He remained in his seat, sprawled comfortably on the cushions, and now he watched her every move. She didn't dare retreat. Nava quickly piled as many dishes as she could safely carry onto her tray and lifted it up, planning to return to the kitchen and remain there until he left. Nava, he said before she could safely escape, put down that tray and come here. Her heart pounded painfully when she glanced around and saw that they were alone. She had to obey. The plates rattled as she set the tray on the table with shaking hands. She walked around to stand in front of him as she had been instructed to do. Here I am. Where were the other servers who were supposed to come help her? Ever since she had been assigned to work with the household staff, Nava had been careful never to work by herself, especially when Aaron was nearby. And now she was alone with him. Look at me, Nava. She lifted her eyes from the floor to his face. He had drunk a great deal of wine at dinner, and his eyes looked bleary. His words sounded slurred. Why don't you like me? He asked. I don't understand. You are my master. I work for your father. You know exactly what I mean, he snarled, making the hairs of Nava's arms prickle. Her heart pounded harder. I've seen you go out of your way to avoid me, and I want to know why. She could barely breathe. She stared at the floor again, trying to think. Servants like me are supposed to stay in the background, and you are lying. And know how I can tell? You are looking at your feet again, and I told you to look at me. She lifted her chin. That's better. Now, don't you find me handsome, Nava? My beauty? Your name suits you very well, by the way, very well. I could eat you up like a luscious bowl of fruit. Like a luscious bowl of fruits. Oh, fear brought tears to her eyes. She let them roll down her face without wiping them. I'm in love with the man who climbed the wall to see me that night. His name is Dan. We're going to be married when my service here is finished. And Aaron's harsh laughter cut off her words. You belong to us for the next 6 years, Nava. You'd be a fool to believe. You'd be a fool to believe that that hot-blooded young man will wait that long. I know I wouldn't. In fact, I don't want to wait another night. He pulled himself to his feet, his eyes slowly scanning her from head to toe. Nava's skin crawled as she took a deep breath and a step back. Her tears fell faster. He could do whatever he wanted, and she couldn't stop him. Please, my lord, I'll answer your question. May I finish my work now? I asked you if you found me handsome and you didn't answer me. What could she say? She didn't dare tell him that that his deviousness made him repulsive to her, no matter what he looked like on the outside. If only the ground could open up and swallow her. Just as her knees began to go weak, she heard the housekeeper's voice behind her. Love Eyes, what's up? Happy Sabbath, my love. How are you doing? Happy Sabbath, happy Easter. Hope you're having a great day, great morning. And you eating all the bun and cheese you can. After this, the price of bun will go back down. So we will wait to eat bun after the Easter, right? And does that sound fair enough? When it's cheaper. You know I like to buy things when they're out of season. But as for me and the bun, I can make my own, so that's okay. But I'm happy to see you, my love. You're in the cold. Girl, I tell you, yesterday was cold as cold could be. I couldn't believe it. The days had all gotten all nice and warmed up to 84, 86. And yesterday after I woke up, tried to open the door, it was cold outside and raining. I don't know. I don't understand this weather. This bipolar weather here in North Carolina is not okay. It needs some medication, I swear. It needs some medication. You can't go on like this, I tell you. Terrible, man. Terrible. I don't know what's going on out there. I can still hear little trickles of raindrops falling. So I'm not gonna go out until the sun comes up. If the sun comes up and it warms out, then I'll go out to look at my plants. Oh, you know, eat bun. It's too hot. I get you. I get you, sis. I get you. I chew bun too hot to chew. Me not deal with it. Me not deal with it either. We are continuing to read the book on this foundation. So we're going to read for a little bit this morning. What's taking you so long, Nava? This table should be all cleared by now. And I'm sorry, Master Aaron. I didn't know you were still here. Do you need something, my lord? I need Nava. He spoke so softly that only she heard him. Pardon me, my lord, the housekeeper asked. Nava took advantage of the interruption to grab the tray of dishes and flee to the kitchen. When the housekeeper, whose name was Ruth, joined her a moment later, Nava sat crouched on the floor beside the work table, sobbing, her knees unable to hold her a moment longer. What's wrong with you? Ruth asked. What happened in there? Nothing happened. Nothing. But, then why aren't you working? The housekeeper was a sturdy, large-boned woman with a round face and coarse black hair, streaked with gray. She often carried a switch with her, and Nava had seen her use it on servants who were lazy or idle. But Nava feared Aaron more than she feared Ruth. Yeah, Ruth carried a switch. I beat the people then. But what is Jesus? Blessed morning, Trev. Joe, what's up? What's up? Leave me alone. I don't trouble bun. No, not. Me and you, my love. Me not trouble bun either. No, sir. No, sir. Me not deal with it. I don't want to return to those places of pain. That's why I stay by myself. Where all things, anything me do, me alone suffer the consequences. I don't have nobody to worry about. And I don't have nobody to give me no additional worries. Me have enough. Joe, happy Sabbath. Joe, how are you doing? Good to see you. Thank you so much for coming. Yes, I'm wake up early, Joe. Yes. Oh my God. She said Ruth often carried a switch that she used on the servants who were idle or lazy. Master Aaron keeps watching me and trying to get me alone with him. And I'm terrified of him, Ruth. I know what he wants, and I'm so scared. You foolish girl, stop crying. Stand up. She grabbed Nava's arm and pulled her to her feet. Don't you know that he has a right to take any bond servant he wants for his wife? Yes, I know. That's why I'm so afraid. If he wants you, that's a good thing. You would be mistress of this household. That's nothing to sniffle and cry about. But I don't love him. I love someone else. And I don't want. Nava, wake up. You are a bond servant, a female bond servant, the bottom of the heap. Nobody cares what you want or don't want. If I had a chance to marry the master and be mistress of this household, believe me, I would take it. But he won't marry me, Ruth. I've seen that Master Aaron is like. I've heard the lies he tells. Once he has his way with me, he'll deny that it ever happened. Nobody will believe me, and none of the other servants will stand up for me or tell Master Malchijah the truth. Ruth turned away and began taking the dishes off the tray, piling them near the basin of water to be washed. Nava waited for her to say something, but it was as if Nava had never spoken. Please help me, Ruth. I don't know what to do. You might be right about young Aaron. Everyone knows what he's like. She picked up a plate and swished it in the water to wash it, then handed it to Nava to dry. But even if he does have his way and refuses to do the honorable thing, it could mean your freedom. Don't you want to go home to your family? 6 years is a long time. Not for that price. Her tears began falling again at the thought of having to tell Dan she was no longer a virgin. I'm in love with a man back home. That fool who broke in here and woke everyone up? Yes, and he may not want to marry me if... Ruth sighed and dropped more dishes into the water with a splash. That's too bad, but there's nothing I can do about it. She gestured to the pile she had already washed. Start drying. I like to get to bed before dawn. Can't you please make sure I'm never alone with him? Make sure there's always someone else working with me, and that I don't have to walk back to my room alone at night. Please, Ruth, please. She sighed again. I'll try. It's all I can promise you. Thank you. Nava felt only slightly relieved. You are a strange one, Nava. Most girls who are as pretty as you would use their beauty to their advantage. They wouldn't resist our handsome young master's attention, but use it to help them get ahead. I admire you for not acting foolishly, and I wish you luck. You'll need it. Why do you say that? Because if Aaron is anything like our master, he'll get what he wants, one way or another. Master Malchijah always does. Nava barely slept, waking with nightmares that left her trembling and in tears. She was still struggling to recover the next morning when her master called all of his servants together in his central courtyard. Even the guards and farm laborers and shepherds had been ordered to come, as well as the kitchen and household staffs. They crowded into the estate's inner courtyard near the goat pens. I have an announcement to make, Malchijah began. Judah's new governor, Nehemiah ben Achaliah, has drawn up plans to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. He's asking every able-bodied man in the province to volunteer to join him so the work can be completed quickly. Nava had traveled to Jerusalem with her family for Passover and the other feasts and seen the miles and miles of crumbled walls surrounding the city. How could they rebuild with that jumbled pile of burnt stones and rubble, and do it quickly? It seemed to her that the task would take years to complete. Wouldn't it be dangerous to try to shift such huge piles of stone? She wondered if Dan had volunteered and if her father and brothers would also help. I'd be overseeing the repairs to the dung gate at the south tip of the city, Malchijah told them. That means clearing away the rubble, restoring the surrounding stonework and support beams, rebuilding the gatehouse and tower, and setting the doors and bolts and bars of the finished gate in place. All but the most essential laborers among you, such as a handful of guards and enough men to care for the animals, will move with me to Jerusalem to help me rebuild the gate. I'll also need to take additional kitchen and household staff with me to serve the meals of those workers. Penina and Ruth, I'll leave it up to you to decide who stays here and who goes with me. Nava heard whispering as everyone glanced around, wondering who would stay and who would go. As one of the newest servants, she would likely be left behind, stuck with the jobs that no one else wanted. I'll be traveling back home for a Shabbat each week, Malchijah said, raising his voice above the murmuring. While I'm away, my sons Aaron and Joseph will oversee my estate. His words sent a shiver of horror through Nava. She would have no protection at all, with Master Malchijah and most of the servants gone. She had to make sure she was among the workers who were sent to Jerusalem. The moment her master dismissed everyone of their duties, Nava ran to plead with the housekeeper. Everyone else was trying to talk with her as well, some begging to stay, others pleading to be among those who were sent to Jerusalem. Nava had to wait until the very last servant had spoken her wishes, and she saw that Ruth was losing patience with this disruption to her well-ordered routine. The housekeeper headed towards the kitchen when the last servant had spoken with her, and Nava hurried to jog along behind her. Not you two, Ruth said when she saw Nava. What do you want? Ruth, please. I can't stay here in Beth Hakerem with Master Aaron in charge. You know what will happen. The master and his guests are waiting. The master and his guests are waiting for their breakfast. Grab your platter and put it on the table before the food gets stone cold. Nava lifted the platter and followed Ruth into the dining area. Malchijah and his guests were already seated, but she was relieved to see that Aaron wasn't there. She set the platter in the middle where they could all reach it, then continued to beg in a soft, urgent voice as she and Ruth returned to the kitchen for more food. Please help me. Please make sure I'm assigned to go to Jerusalem. The master will want more experienced workers than you with him in Jerusalem. He may be entertaining other noblemen and even the governor. Please, Ruth. Please, I beg you. I'll do anything you say. But please, please, don't make me stay here with Master Aaron. Please. That's enough, Nava. She wondered if she had gone too far and made Ruth angry. But a moment later, the housekeeper mumbled, I'll see what I can do. Nava wished she still believed in prayers. She would pray to be far, far away from Beth Hakerem, far away from the danger. But why bother? The Almighty One never seemed to answer her prayers. Welcome into the live, my friends. A happy Sabbath morning to you all. I hope you all are having a great morning so far. It is Saturday, Easter Saturday actually, and we are here reading the book On This Foundation. For those of you who are just coming in, we have already read the book of Nehemiah chapters 8, 9, and 10. And now we are reading the book On This Foundation. I want to say thanks to everybody who has come in. Don't forget, guys, hit that like button and share the stream and invite your friends to come on over to the reading of the book On This Foundation. Now we're on to chapter 20. Jerusalem. The sun was just beginning to lighten the sky behind the Mount of Olives as Nehemiah walked with his brothers from the governor's residence to the open plaza near the valley gate. Today he would organize his section leaders so they could start rebuilding the wall. He was so eager to begin that his brothers had trouble keeping up with him, their footsteps crunching on the quiet streets of the slumbering city as they hurried down the sloping road behind him. Did they make you get up this early in the morning when you lived in Susa? His brother Anani asked, yawning loudly. Even the sun had sense enough not to rise this early, Ephraim added. Why don't you? We need to make the best use of the available daylight, Nehemiah replied. I asked my section leaders to meet here before the morning sacrifice so we can finish in time to go up to the temple. If we start building right after that, we can get a lot done before the heat saps everyone's strength. He slowed his steps to their pace, aware that he was asking a lot of them. His brothers and their families had moved into the governor's residence with him, so they would be available to work closely with him. All right, Levi, see you later, my love. Have yourself a great day, my darling. It's always a pleasure to see you. The stars had still been out this morning when Nehemiah had awakened. They had grabbed a quick bite to eat, gathered their things, and started walking, but his brother's eyes still drooped with sleep. Are the maps and lists all ready? He asked them. Yes, my lord and master, Anani said with mock seriousness. Sorry, Nehemiah said. I got used to ordering people around in Susa. You are certainly very good at it, sir, Ephraim muttered. I had to be. The empire's life depended on it, and now the security of Jerusalem does. Well, just don't run ahead of the Almighty One, Ephraim said, and decide to crown yourself king. By the time they reached the valley gate, about halfway down the western wall of the city, the sun had inched higher above the ridge, quickly warming the morning. People had begun to stir in the nearby houses, and he smelt the aroma of cooking fires and heard the grating of hand mills as women ground flour to make bread. Mounds of rubble lay piled all around the area inside the valley gate, but he refused to let it discourage him. Soon all these stones would be gone, God's willing, and the elaborate gatehouse would be rebuilt. I've decided to set up our project headquarters in this open area, he told his brothers. It's not very spacious, but it will be a convenient place to oversee the work since the site is easily reached from most sections of the wall. That's very fair of you, Nehemiah, Anani said with a humorous laugh. That way, everyone will have to walk uphill to confer with you. Those working near the very bottom of the ridge will have to climb up here to talk to you, and those working near the temple will have to climb uphill again after they talk to you. It's for my convenience, not theirs, Nehemiah said, so I can move quickly to wherever I'm needed. And you are quick, I must say, Ephraim said. He was still trying to catch his breath after their brisk walk. One by one, the other leaders began to arrive, moving between the houses like shadows in the early dawn light. His 3 aides, Rehum, Jehonahan, and Levi, were among the first to join him. Of the 3, only Jehonahan looked awake and alert. Nehemiah again wished he could have investigated these 3 men thoroughly before taking them into his confidence, as he would have done in Susa. But there hadn't been time. Instead, he had been forced to rely on the judgment of the officials who had recommended them. Don't always take the enemy's recommendations, because the enemy is not going to be recommending somebody that's going to work in your best interest. The enemy is going to recommend somebody who is going to work in his best interest. But he knew without a doubt that he could trust his brothers and was glad they had agreed to be his right-hand men. Rays of sunlight streaked the sky above the Mount of Olives as the last of the leaders arrived. Time to begin. This is an exciting day for all of us, Nehemiah said. Each of you has volunteered to oversee a section of the wall or to rebuild one of the 10 gates. For those of you who require lumber, you will need to talk with my brother. Ephraim lifted his hand to everyone who would know who he was. He's in charge of procuring timber from the forest kings, a few miles south of Jerusalem. But he's going to need wagons and teams of oxen and mules to haul it here. So if any of you can spare your wagons or teams, please let Ephraim know. I hope by now that you have had a chance to survey your assigned section and have begun to gather your workers, Nehemiah continued. People from my district came forward to volunteer in great numbers, someone shouted. Mine too. Good. He paused as Anani handed him the map. This morning, I want to go over this map of the sections and their leaders so you can see who will be working alongside you and so I can learn who you are. I'll start at the north side of the city near the Temple Mount and proceed along the wall to the west. The first leader is Eliashib, the high priest, who will oversee the restoration of the temple citadel. My fellow priests and I have committed to rebuilding the section of wall from the sheep gate to the western corner. Inside the Tower of the 100 and the Tower of Ananel. Excellent. I know that's asking a lot of you and your men. The Babylonians completely destroyed the citadel and its gates when they broke through to invade the city, so it will be a huge task to rebuild it. We'll need fortified towers and a reinforced wall because this section is still the most vulnerable. We all know that our enemies typically attack from that direction, and you have also volunteered to repair the sheep gate and reset its doors, I see. Yes, Governor. The sheep used for the daily temple sacrifices come through that gate, so I intend to consecrate it for holy use. My grandfather, Jeshua ben Jazodak, arrived with the first group of exiles who returned with Zerubbabel. And he would have been overjoyed to see these gates and fortifications rebuilt. Didn't your grandfather help rebuild the temple? Yes, and served as its first high priest. Nehemiah continued reading from his list, calling each section's leader's name, and then memorizing each face. He was thankful for his training as a cupbearer, which had taught him to remember names and faces. The king's life had depended on his ability to recognize every palace worker on site so he could spot intruders. When he read the name Meshullam, son of Berechiah, it seemed familiar to him. Nehemiah tried to recall why. It's Meshullam. And along with repairing a section on this western wall, I will also make repairs opposite my living quarters on the eastern wall. Very good. Nehemiah recognized him now. He had borrowed Meshullam's mule the night he had inspected the walls. And I see that the men of Tekoa are listed next, but I don't have a name for the person in charge of that section. We hadn't chosen one yet, Governor, a volunteer replied. Our nobles shirked their duties and refused to put their shoulders to the work. They disdain manual labor. Where is Tekoa? 6 miles south of Bethlehem and 11 miles from Jerusalem. We are ashamed of our noblemen, my lord, but very proud to be the hometown of the prophet Amos. And we have also volunteered to do double duty and repair another section on the opposite side of the city, near the wall of Ophel. May the Almighty One reward your labor. You are to be recommended for your enthusiasm in spite of your leader's bad example. As Nehemiah continued reading the names, he was surprised to see that the leaders of Gibeon and Mizpah had volunteered to make repairs. Both towns were under the authority of Governor Sanballat, and Mizpah had an important Samaritan administrative career. Nehemiah resisted the impulse to question the two leaders and ask where their loyalties truly lay. Instead, he made a mental note to watch them closely. Continuing around the perimeter of the city, he came to another name he already knew, Rephaiah, ruler of the half district of Jerusalem. We'll repair the next section. Guys, remember who Rephaiah was? Rephaiah was the father of Yitzhak, the young man who was murdered. He was supposed to be Chana's husband, but he was murdered before they were married. Yes, gladly, Rephaiah said. If the wall has been built a year ago, my son Yitzhak might still be alive. Nehemiah quickly moved on, but not before recalling the grief-filled eyes of Yitzhak's young bride-to-be. He had dined with her at the home of her father, Shalom, ruler of the other half-district of Jerusalem. Did the woman now understand why he hadn't answered her question that night? He read the names of 4 more men who were each repairing a section along the western wall and saw that her father, Shalom, had volunteered to make repairs between the Tower of Ovens and the Valley Gate. Hanun and the residents of Zanoah will rebuild the Valley Gate right behind us, Nehemiah continued. That will be a huge job, Hanun. An important job, and I see you have also volunteered to rebuild the wall all the way to the Dung Gate. That's an extraordinary length. Have you had a chance to look over the work? Yes, Governor. The original wall was built on a steep rock that is still intact. We'll only need to add 3 or 4 more feet of wall to its height. Even so, thank you for your willingness to tackle a huge job that takes us as far as the Dung Gate. A very big task, considering that it's one of Jerusalem's main gates at the junction of Hinnom and Kidron valleys. I see that Malchijah ben Rechab, ruler of the district of Beth Akarem, will be rebuilding that gate. Yes, Governor Nehemiah, I'm Malchijah. We met the other day. I remember. Malchijah had struck Nehemiah as a very personable man, extremely astute, and obviously very wealthy. Judging by his clothing and his staff of servants and the fine wine he had given Nehemiah as a welcoming gift. I have already consulted your engineers, Malchijah said, smiling his crooked grin. And they have instructed me on the best way to proceed and the type of gate I should construct. I'll be working closely with them. Very good. Your gate and the next section all the way to the Fountain Gate are extremely crucial to the southern defense of Jerusalem. The Pool of Siloam is within this section too. Have you decided what to do about it yet? Yes. King Hezekiah constructed the Pool of Siloam so it would be accessible to the new settlers in the Mishneh. But since the Mishneh is no longer populated, I plan to close off outside access to the pool by building a wall on that western side. Excellent. Thank you. Now we come to the long stretch of wall on Jerusalem's eastern side, above the Kidron Valley. I've had a chance to examine it with our engineers, and we have concluded that the central section of the old wall was too badly destroyed and there is too much rubble from the supporting structures to rebuild it. The supports were constructed over a period of many years, and we don't have years. Instead, we'll build a new wall higher on the slope and make the steep cliff and rubble field part of our defenses. That means the city will be smaller than before the Babylonian destruction, and a few of the houses that already had been rebuilt will end up outside the new wall. He took a moment to mop the sweat from his face as the section leaders talked about themselves. The sun had reached the rim of the ridge and shone directly into his eyes as he faced the gathered men. Because of the great difficulty the cliff presents and the fact that we'll be building a new wall from scratch, I've divided the eastern wall beyond the fountain gate into much smaller sections. He consulted his list again and read off the names of each leader as far as the house of Eras. What is the house of Eras, by the way? He asked. Tradition says that it dates back to the time of King David and served as a barracks and an armory for the legendary mighty men. But the remains of it will now be outside the wall you propose to build. I see. That's unfortunate. But right now, we don't have much use for an armory or a barracks. Really? You are rebuilding a city and you are afraid of the enemies, but you're going to build the city and leave out your armory and your barracks? Nehemiah continued reading, putting a face with each name. He was encouraged to see that a good number of priests and temple servants had volunteered to rebuild sections of the wall adjacent to their residence. Even tradesmen such as the goldsmiths and the merchants guild were taking part in this project. I believe that covers everyone, he said when he reached the sheep gate on the north side once again. Thank you. Nehemiah could tell by the sun's height that the morning sacrifice would begin soon. But there was just one more thing he wanted to say. I know it's time to dismiss you, so we can make our way to the temple. But before I do, I want to emphasize how important it will be to work closely with the men making repairs on either side of you. Each section of the wall must join tightly together with the ones on either side, he said, lacing his fingers together to demonstrate. And of course, the walls must fuse seamlessly into the gates. A vertical seam will weaken the wall, just as strife and contention and jealousy weakens our community. Gentlemen, we must work together as one man for the good of all God's chosen people. Nehemiah felt euphoric as he turned to his brothers and his 3 aides for the uphill walk to the temple. Then he froze when he saw the look of concern on Ephraim's face. What's wrong? Did I forget something? You'd better read this. It arrived this morning from Samaria. One of your servants brought it here while you were speaking. Judging from Ephraim's expression, it wasn't good news. Tell me what it says. Did you read it? Ephraim nodded. Governor Sanballat will arrive from official state visit in 2 days, along with Tobiah the Amorite leader, and Geshem the Arab. I wonder what their plans are. We know Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem are up to no good, based on the readings from the day before yesterday. Well, Nehemiah exhaled. That certainly didn't take long. The Samaritan governor has obviously heard about our building project. I wonder if you have a spy among us. Oh, yes, my friend, the spy is Johanan. In any event, let's go, he said as he started walking uphill with the others towards the temple. We are going to need the mighty one's help now more than ever. How shall I instruct your servants to prepare for their visit? Ephraim asked. Tell them to do the bare minimum. I can't afford the time or the expense of entertaining these men. If they are going to barge in uninvited when I have work to do, then they can hardly expect royal treatment. Won't they be insulted? Anani asked. I really don't care. Our work on the wall is much more important. We are off to a good start in spite of this latest distraction. Every section of wall and every gate has a capable overseer. Some men may have bitten off more than they can chew. Like the nobles of Tekoa have disappointed me by not volunteering at all. But I believe this work will be accomplished quickly. I'm very pleased. Do you think Governor Sambalat and the others will try to stop us from rebuilding the wall? Anani asked. No doubt, but they won't succeed. Rebuilding Jerusalem's wall is God's work, and from now on, those who try to halt its progress are opposing the Almighty One. They will become his enemies as well as ours. Chapter 21. Nava stopped. Nava stopped every few yards as she climbed the stairs to the Temple Mount, taking time to scan all the faces for a familiar one. She had attended the morning sacrifice every day for the past week and recognized many of the same people, such as the old woman with the tattered headscarf who wept when she prayed, the group of young Torah students who followed their Rebbe, that's their rabbi. You know, in this book they spell it Rebbe, just like in the Bible, but it's their rabbi, guys, who followed their rabbi like a string of chicks behind a hen. And the new governor, Nehemiah, who never missed a day of worship. But Nava was losing hope of ever finding Dan or her father and brothers among the crowd of worshippers. Thanks to her master's housekeeper, Nava had moved to Jerusalem to work in Malkijah's city house. The city's population had swelled in size as it did during the annual pilgrimage, with hundreds of men from every corner of the province flocking to rebuild Jerusalem's wall. Yard food is here. What's up, sis? How you doing? Good to see you. Happy Easter Saturday to you, my love. The sounds and sights of construction were everywhere, and the noise even drifted into her master's kitchen, where Nava worked during the day. From sunup until sundown, the activity on the wall altered only during the daily sacrifices and on Sabbaths. Nava felt certain that Dan would volunteer to help. Maybe Abba and her brothers had too. Her master supervised repairs to the dung gate using volunteers from his district of Beth Hakerem. But she doubted that Dan or Abba would work for him. So where were they working? She thought. She paused to catch her breath and looked around when she reached the top of the stairs. The early morning air already felt warm. Then she hurried over to a group of young laborers who were standing together, talking. Excuse me, she said, where are you from? Beth Ezer, one of them told her. Have any of you seen a young man named Dan Ben Yohan from Beth Hakerem? The men shook their heads and Nava moved on. The people she had questioned this past week had come from all over the province of Judah, and she had met workers from places like Mizpah and Tekoa and Gibeon. Whenever a master's cook needed spices or fresh fish or something else from the marketplace, Nava had offered to go, taking a different route each time, hoping to run into Dan. Instead, Nava is very determined, guys. Instead of eating breakfast, she spent the time every morning at the temple, searching for her family and for Dan and his family, desperate to let them know she was here and would visit with them as soon as she could. Nava continued searching the crowd as the priest sacrificed the lamb and laid it on the altar. Sometimes the Levite choir sang, but even they had volunteered to repair sections of the wall. She watched another priest take a glowing coal from the altar using special tongs and a fire pan, then carried it into the sanctuary where only they were allowed to go. This was the time when she was supposed to pray, while the fragrant aroma of burning incense ascended to heaven. Nava still wasn't convinced that the Almighty One listened to her prayers. But with nothing to lose, she closed her eyes and whispered the words that she prayed every morning. Please help me find Dan and his family. So that was Nava's prayer. Help in finding Dan and his family. When the service ended, hold on there, my light is, hold on there, people. Let me get me some more light here. All right, let's continue. When the service ended, she hurried towards the stairs with all of the other worshippers, scanning the faces on the crowd once again. None of her masters or the servants came to the morning sacrifice, and she didn't dare to be gone for very long. With fewer servants and many laborers to feed, Nava worked harder here than she had in Beth Akarem. Malkijah's house was small, but still opulent, with beautifully paneled walls and exquisite rugs on the floors. Along with feeding his workers every day, he also liked to entertain important people whenever he could. Sometimes those multi-course meals lasted well into the night. Nava was halfway across the courtyard when she suddenly glimpsed Dan's face in the crowd. Was she seeing things? After hoping and searching for so many days, had she only imagined it? She wove between the other worshippers who were moving much too slowly, craning her neck to see. It was Dan. He stood near the top of the steps, leading down from the Temple Mount, and if he had continued walking down the stairs, she would have missed him. But he had halted, stepping aside for some reason, and he turned his head in her direction. Dan! Nava shouted. It was a miracle! But with the courtyard jammed with people, he didn't hear or see her. He wasn't expecting to see her after all. She elbowed her way through the flowing stream, calling his name, ignoring the stern looks and loud shushing from people all around her. Dan! Dan! Wait! Wait! He looked up when he heard his name, then froze when he saw that it was Nava. Good morning, Winsome. How are you doing? He didn't move, didn't run to her as she had expected him to, and for a horrible moment she wondered if he had found someone else. Maybe he had decided not to wait 6 long years for her, like Master Aaron predicted. But when she reached him, she saw the love brimming in his eyes as he whispered her name. And she knew that none of what she had imagined was true. Dan loved her. Dan loved his Nava. Nava, Nava, is that really you? Winsome, what's up? How are you doing this Easter Saturday? Let's talk about Easter Monday. This Easter Saturday, how are you doing, my love? We have a few more minutes into the reading. We are going to read as the few more minutes provide us, as it can afford us. Before this morning reading is going to end, we are going to be coming back later to do some other things like baking the Easter bun. But for right now, we are reading the book on this foundation. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming. If you're new here, a very special welcome to you. And to all my returning travelers, I want to say thank you all for always showing up. This is our safe space, our happy space. And I'm happy you all have showed up. Thank you all so much. Let us continue. Yes, I thought I'd never find you, she said, panting to catch her breath. And I thought I'd never see you again. His voice choked, and it was a moment before he could speak. She could tell that he wanted to hold her and kiss her the way he had on the morning she had left. And she longed to fling herself into his arms too, but she didn't dare, especially in the temple courtyard, surrounded by so many people. Are you all right, Nava? That's all I wanted to know that night I came to Beth Akarem to see you. Are they treating you well? Nava hesitated, unsure whether or not to tell him about Aaron. There was nothing that Dan could do about her master's son, and she knew he would only worry. Yes, I'm being treated well, she said. Have that man's sons touched you? I don't see how they could resist a beautiful woman like you. But his sons are in Beth Hakerem, and I'm working here in Jerusalem. There's nothing to worry about. His shoulders sagged with relief. If they ever lay their filthy hands on you, I'll murder them. It's as simple as that. You don't need to worry, Dan. Don't worry. She rested her hand on his arm to soothe him, and again The urge to hold him tightly and feel his arms around her was so powerful that she quickly pulled her hand away. Where are you going? Can we talk together? Dan asked. I have to return to Master Malkijah's house. It's here in the city of the Hill of Ophel. They started down the stairs, and when the crowd crushed them close together, Nava reveled in the warmth of his bare arm against her. Mikey, what's up? How you doing, my love? Happy Easter Saturday to you, my love. How are you doing? I'll be working here while Malkijah helps rebuild the wall. Did you come to Jerusalem to work on the wall too? Yes, they called for volunteers, and since there are not much to do on Abba's farm because of the drought, I decided to come. Are you working at the dung gate with the other men from Beth Hakerem? No, I refuse to have anything to do with your master. I'm helping on the eastern side of the city with the new wall that they're building on the top of the ridge. That's wonderful. Maybe we'll get to see each other more often. I'm allowed to come here to sacrifice every morning. They reached the bottom of the stairs, and Nava pointed to the left. Malkijah lives down this street near the governor's house. Walk with me, and I'll show you. Dan reached for her hand, now that the crowd had thinned. His grip felt warm and calloused, and wonderfully familiar. I don't know which is worse, Nava, not seeing you at all, or being with you and not being able to hold you in my arms. I know. I feel the same way. She squeezed his hand. I'm so glad I found you. Listen, the reason I came to the temple today was to pray. I haven't been to any of the sacrifices since coming to work in the city, but today I came to pray for our future. There may be a tiny sliver of hope for us. I could use some hope. The book. I'm reading the book. We are on chapter 21 of the book on this foundation. I read Nehemiah's chapters 8, 9, and 10 before reading the book this morning. Maybe I should say hi, everyone, because the life is expanding. I may miss someone. And I don't want you to miss anyone, my sister. I don't want you to miss anyone. How are you doing? It's so good to see you. I was on your channel. I saw you went back home. I see that you went back home to a funeral. I hope everything is okay with you, my love. I didn't even get to see you last time I came down south. I mean, we gotta meet up again. You are such a delight. Mikey, you are such a delight. Oh my God. Your presence is and your laughter is just so palpable, just so infectious. I want some more. And people do not take kindly to being overlooked. Exactly. Oh my God. People do not take kindly to being overlooked. You are so right. Let's continue reading the book on this foundation, written by Lynn Austin. Listen, the reason I came to the temple today was to pray. I haven't been to any of the sacrifices since coming to work in the city, but today I came to pray for our future. There may be a tiny sliver of hope for us. I could use some hope. There's an undercurrent of unrest that may work in our favor. The governor's aide, a man named Johannahan, who is very high up in the new governor's administration, came to our work site the other day. He's been visiting other sites too and talking to all the poor families like ours. He says we would have a chance of being heard by Governor Nehemiah if we stage a protest at the temple. Johannahan is on our side, Nava, and he's against all the wealthy landowners who are holding our mortgages and taking us as bond servants. He's helping us meet together after work and get organized so we can confront the governor as a group. Johannahan says if we refuse to work on the wall unless the governor helps us, We'll have to do something about greedy men like Malkesia. Dan, please don't do anything to get in trouble. What if Johanan is wrong about the governor being sympathetic? Rich men like your master need to be stopped. Our two families are the only ones who are suffering. The same thing is happening all over the province, with other rich landowners taking farms and crops and enslaving children. Shh, someone will hear you. They were close to her master's house, and she pulled him to a halt, lowering her voice. I know how poor our people are. Most of the women I work with are bond servants for the same reason that I am. My friend Rachel had to leave her husband and two young children behind, and she can't even visit them. But what good can come from a protest? Guys, you see, Johanna Han, he is he is a real traitor. You see, he is one of Nehemiah's closest confidants. He is one of his closest aides. And there he is going out to encourage the people to protest. But what good can come from a protest? We'll get the governor's attention if we all stop building the walls. Besides, we can't possibly make the situation any worse than it already is, can we? Maybe the governor really will listen to us and do something about it. Please be careful, Dan. Malkesia is a very powerful man. You already made him angry once before when you broke into his house. I don't think he'll be as forgiving the next time. I don't care. I hate him. I'm not afraid of him. I need to go. Malkesia's house is the last one on this street, so you'd better turn back. You can't take a chance that anyone will see us or recognize you. Can we meet again tomorrow in the same place before the sacrifice? Yes, I'll be there. But Dan, promise me that you'll be very careful. I will, Nava. I will. I love you, Nava. I love you too. She pulled her hand free from his and ran the rest of the way home, knowing that if she was near him one moment longer, she wouldn't be able to resist the urge to throw herself in his arms and cover his beloved face with her kisses. Chapter 22. Don't let it, sis. Don't let it. Don't let it. Yes, Winsome. I see where it starts from, my sister. I see. I see where it starts from, Winsome. Sometimes when you can't resist the temptation, you just have to go ahead and do what you must. But sometimes when you're able to resist the temptation, good things come of it and sometimes not. And because we cannot predict the future, we don't know when we should or shouldn't. We just go by the feeling and the prospects of hope. The prospects of hope that whatever decision we make and whatever we intend to do, it will all work out well for our benefit. Of course, it sweet me. The kisses. Where you know where my mind went. You know where my mind went. Where all the kisses come from. That's where my mind went. Chapter 22. Jerusalem. Let's see what's going to happen. Chana finished packing the bread as she had just baked them. She packed them into one carrying basket and covered it with a clean cloth. Are you ready to go? She asked her sisters. I think so, Judith said. We can always run back home if we forgot something. Chana's nerves twitched with excitement. Today, she would finally start rebuilding Jerusalem's wall. She had barely been able to sit still beside the earth all morning, waiting for each round of flatbread to slowly turn brown on the stone griddle. She and her sisters had been giddy with anticipation as they had prepared this midday meal for Abba and his workers. Chana hoped he hadn't changed his mind about allowing them to stay and work afterwards. That's everything, Sarah said. She lifted one of the water jars that they had filled at the spring this morning and balanced it on her head. Lead the way, Chana. Do you think the workers will appreciate how hard it was for us to cook all this food and bake bread on such a blistering day? Judith asked. Judith asked. The paving stones are almost as hot as the earth stones. I'm sure the workers already know how hot it is, Sarah said. It must be terrible to work out there without even any shade, moving all those heavy stones. We'll find out how hard it is soon enough, Chana said. The two of you can leave after we deliver the food if you want to, but I'm planning to stay and work this afternoon. I'm staying too, Judith said, unless Abba goes back on his promise. He wouldn't dare. Chana's arms ached as she walked down the street of the bakers from their house carrying the heavy load. A few minutes later, she passed the governor's headquarters near the valley gate, where a knot of men stood around a work table, conferring beneath a roof made of rushes. Even before she left the city, through the gate, she could hear shouts and grunts and the clang of tools in the distance. The in and out whooshing sound of a saw like breathing as someone cut wood. The road led immediately downhill into the steep valley from the gate, and Chana and her sisters had to turn round to see their assignment section. It began to the left of the gate and continued north all the way up to the hill of to the hill to the Tower of Ovens. The jagged remnants of the wall weren't even half their original height, and a jumbled blanket of fallen stones littered the slope below it. But what stopped Chana in her tracks were the laborers. They had removed their tunics in the boiling heat to work in nothing but their underbreeches. Their bare chests glistened with sweat. She whirled around to face the other way at the same time that her sisters did. And that's because they dare not look at those men who were naked down to their breeches. So everybody was so hot in the summer sun, they took off their clothes, but they were still working under the broiling sun. Maybe we shouldn't be here, Sarah said. Those men are indecent. Chana wondered if her cheeks were as red as Sarah's. No, come on, she said, turning around again. We have all seen a man's bare chest before, haven't we? Not that many at once, Judith said. She had turned around again too, and she stared at them, wide-eyed. I'm picturing a bare chest myself. Me not jealous, you know, in some. Kisses are a good thing. Who hasn't been kissed to the point where their toes curled? You don't know what you're missing. I'm not longing for it. I'm not longing for a kiss. I'm not longing for a kiss. I can do without. I've had a lot. Just find Abba and don't look at the men, Chana said, and quit staring, Judith. It's always indecent to stare at people, no matter how many clothes they have on. Or off, Sarah said. Abba called for a lunch break when he saw Chana and her sisters coming, and the men quickly gathered around, grateful for the food and water. They sat down on the ground in a circle and passed around the basket of bread, putting the bowls of cooked lentils, spiced chickpeas, chopped cucumber salad, and roasted eggplant in the middle, where everyone could use their bread to scoop into them. While they ate, Chana explored the site, unable to sit still. The long stretch of wall was difficult to get close to because of the steepness of the slope and the scree of toppled stones. She could see where some of the men had labored all morning to clear an area directly in front of the wall, and judging by the orderly piles of rocks, other workers had sorted stones according to size. Nearby was a pile of logs and the saws the men were using to cut them. She hoped the laborers would eat quickly and return to work so she could join them. Thank you for the food, my angels, Abba said when the men finished and the baskets and bowls lay empty on the ground. He placed one hand on Chana's back and the other on Judith's and tried to gently herd them back towards the gate. You deserve a long nap this afternoon after all that cooking. Chana wiggled away from his guiding hand. I have no intention of resting, Abba. I'm staying here to work. So am I, Judith said. You promised we could, remember? Now give us jobs to do. I but you, he was so flustered that Chana wanted to laugh. He was ruler of the half district of Jerusalem, yet he couldn't speak. She would have felt sorry for him under any other circumstances, but she was not backing down. A promise is a promise. How did I ever let you talk me into this? He asked, tugging his beard. It doesn't matter, Abba, but you gave us your word. Tell us what everyone is doing, and we'll see what we can do to help. Well, as soon as we finish clearing some of those blocks away from the wall, we'll erect the scaffolding. They are cutting the wood for it over there. As you can see, we are fighting the slope of the hill, so both the stones and the scaffolding could easily shift. It's dangerous work, which is why I wish you would go home. And we won't stand where it's dangerous, Chana said. What else needs to be done? He hesitated, then said, we need to build a crane and anchor it in place. Then outfit it with ropes to hoist the larger rocks to the top of the wall. Again, it's very dangerous work because if one of the ropes would happen to break, you can't discourage us. You can't discourage us, Abba. You can't. What are all those tools for? She could see he was losing patience. But, being Abba, he answered just the same. We use the levers to pry up the rocks so we can fast the ropes around them and lift them with the crane. The barrows are for moving the lighter stones. The chisels and cutting tools are used to smooth off the rough, broken edges so the stones will fit neatly together. And how will they actually build the wall? They can't just pile up all of these rocks, can they? Chana hoped that if she kept her father talking, he would get used to having her and her sisters here. No, there is a system to it. We set the larger stones in place first, widthwise, then wedge the smaller ones in between along with mortar until it's a solid layer. We'll make plumb lines and level lines from these cords and clay weights over there. Each course of stone must be straight vertically and level horizontally in order for the wall to stand. If it isn't, the wall will topple over. It sounds important to get that right, Chana said. It's very important. We are fortunate for the foundations are solid in our section. We won't have to dig trenches for new foundations like they do in the northeast corner. Abba had called it our section. Chana smiled to herself. He was softening. She had been looking around while he talked to see which task she and Judith and Sarah could handle, and she decided that the simplest job would be to sort stones, picking up the ones they could easily lift and piling them to one side. She retied her scarf around her hair so it hung down her back like a horse's mane. And as soon as Abba was distracted by a question from one of the workers, she made her way up the hill, through the debris, to where the men sorted rocks. She knew better than to ask Abba's permission. Why give him a chance to stop her? Judith and Sarah hurried up the hill to join her. Be careful, angels, he said when he discovered what they were doing. This isn't hard at all, Abba, she called down to him as she threw another rock into the pile she was making. We are stronger than you think, Abba, Judith told him. You girls better watch out for snakes. One of the workers warned as Chana bent to lift another stone. She dropped it in surprise, barely missing her foot. But she wouldn't let a smile or the other workers discourage her. She wouldn't let a snake or the other workers discourage her. Thanks for the warning, she said, smiling at the man. Everything about the work should have made Chana run. The intense heat, her aching back, the sun in the afternoon sun, the way the rough stones scraped and cut in her hands. The worker had been right about snakes, and she shrieked when she spotted one slithering between the stones near her feet. Yet Chana felt happier than she had in a long time and knew that working on Jerusalem's wall was having a healing effect. She was fighting back against Yitzhak's murderers. They would never sneak inside the city again. No other woman would have to suffer the senseless grief that she had suffered. Hey, Chana! She looked up to see why Judith had called to her. Her sister's hair looked like a glowing halo around her beaming face. What, Judith? You are singing again. It was true, Chana realized. She had begun to sing as she worked. Yes, Chana was singing as she worked because she was so engrossed in what she was doing. She was turning her pain into passion. The pain of losing Yitzhak, the pain of losing Yitzhak had been her motivator to come to Jerusalem to work on the city alongside the men. She wanted to see the city walls rebuilt and fortified so that the enemy could not breach it, could not come in and do to another family what they had done to hers. Who is that? Jamaica Overseas TV? Jamaica Overseas TV, what's up? How are you doing? It's always a pleasure to see you. What's going on this Easter Saturday, my friend? Well, ain't not much going on. It's Easter Saturday. We are reading for a little bit before I go to fix myself up, get myself ready for the day, take my morning bath and get myself ready for the day, and then come back and bake bun and look at the expensive cheese that I bought. I'm not going to open the expensive cheese because my baby isn't here to enjoy it with me. So I'm going to be eating my cheese with the American cheddar cheese. My bun with my American cheddar cheese and Swiss cheese. I don't know about you, but I love Swiss cheese. I just think Swiss cheese has the mildest flavor. And I think it's easier on the stomach too. But anyway, it is Easter. And I know a lot of us focus more on the bun and cheese, the hot cross bun and the duck bread and all those things, more than we even focus on why Easter is even a thing to begin with. But let us continue. We are on to chapter 23 of the book on this foundation. Nehemiah was standing deep in the foundation trench that his workers had dug in the northeastern corner of the wall when the messenger arrived. He spotted the provincial governors and their entourage, the men said, panting. They are about a mile north of here on the Damascus Road. Nehemiah stifled a groan. He would have to lay aside his work for his official visit with them. His brothers, his aides, and all the men on his council would have to stop working too. Many of those councilmen supervised the wall section or the gate. And Nehemiah hated to take them away from their work, but he must follow protocol. Is their delegation a large one? He asked. It appears to be. They brought soldiers with them. Very well. He brushed dirt from his hands and reached up to Anani, who stood on top, for help climbing out of the trench. Tell my staff to go to the Yashana gate and get ready to greet them, he told the messenger. I'll be there shortly. He turned back to the excuse me, guys. I choked on a little bit of spittle there. He turned back to the men digging the foundation trench and said, You need to make it deeper. The ground has shrunk because of the drought. When the rains finally do come, the earth will swell and cause the foundations to shift. Expansion and shrinkage are facts of life in our climate, so our foundations must be deep. Yes, my lord. He saw Anani eyeing his dusty, sweat-soaked tunic. Shall I have someone bring you a clean robe, Governor? He asked with a grin. I suppose I should change. Thanks. He looked at the bustles of work all around him, the jumble of scaffolding and ropes and tools, and hated to leave. The sounds of progress, shouting workers and pounding chisels, were like music to his ears. You know it's going to be impossible to disguise what we are doing, Anani said. I wouldn't hide it even if I could. His brother left to help the messenger alert the council members and district leaders that the delegation was about to arrive. Nehemiah quickly doused his face and hands with water and put on his clean robe, which arrived just in time for him to stand at the gate and welcome the procession. Sanballat led the way, of course, overdressed in the in the oppressive summer heat, in heavy ornate clothing. Sweat ran down his round face, which was as red as his robe. He took two horses. It took two horses to pull him and his chariot, while Tobiah the Ammonite and Geshem the Arab rode on horseback. A gaggle of their underlings and aides swarmed around them, raising clouds of dust on the parched road. Sanballat had also brought an escort of mounted cavalry and foot soldiers, which Nehemiah recognized as an attempt to intimidate him. He remained unfazed. Welcome, he said, forcing a smile. I hoped your first visit could wait until we weren't quite so busy. As you can see, we are in the middle of a major building project. What is this you are doing? Sanballat asked, gesturing to the scaffolding that framed the Yashana gate. He was playing dumb. It was obvious to anyone with eyes what they were doing. Even though work at the gate had halted to allow the delegation to pass through without the risk of falling rocks and debris, the walls of Jerusalem are in need of repairs, Nehemiah replied. He could play dumb as well. I decided that the months between the end of summer and the beginning of the winter rains were a good time to get the work done. Please follow me, if you will. I have prepared my assembly hall for your visit. My councilmen and district leaders will join us shortly. I think I'd like to see some of your work first. Nehemiah had anticipated this request and was ready with a reply. You can get a glimpse of the work right here at the Yashana gate, but I'm afraid it would be impossible to take your delegation any place else. We are still in the very early stages of construction, and a great deal of rubble litters most of the sites. The Yashana gate is an exception because it's been in use all these years. This way, please. Sanballat didn't move. You are rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem. It was a statement, not a question. Yes, we are. Sanballat laughed out loud. Ha ha ha. He turned around to his chariot to face his associates and the Samaritan army that had accompanied him. Did you hear that? What do these feeble Jews think they're doing? Will they restore the wall? Will they offer sacrifices for divine help? Will they finish in a day? Can they bring the stones back to life from those heaps of rubble, burnt as they are? Just look at what they are building. Tobiah added with a mocking laugh. If even a fox climbed up on it, he would break down their wall of stones. Nehemiah signaled to his aides and continued walking to his guests continued walking so his guests would have no choice except to follow. But all the way to his residence, he silently prayed to the Almighty One. Hear us, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in a land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they have thrown insults in the faces of the builders. It seemed to take forever for the three leaders to refresh themselves and settle into their places in the council chamber. Longer still to plow through all the formal introductions and welcomes. Nehemiah could barely control his impatience and would have gladly skipped all of this if he could have. When Sanballat finally got around to the purpose of his visit, he repeated the question he had already asked. What is this that you are doing? Then he added a more inflammatory one. Are you rebelling against the king? Nehemiah barely kept his temper. That's an extremely serious charge. Why would I rebel against King Artaxerxes? He's sponsoring this work. Ah, but does he know what you are really up to here in the backwaters of his empire? Sanballat rose from his chair, causing the wood to groan with relief, then addressed the men on the council. Nehemiah is new to our region and doesn't understand the dangerous political implications of fortifying this city. But I'm sure you gentlemen understand. And you also know that you'd be executed as traitors along with your leader when the king learns of your subversive activities. What a piece of a threat! Nehemiah's jaw ached from clenching it to avoid giving a heated reply. If any of his council members had doubts about his leadership, the poetry Samaritan leader was reinforcing them. Nehemiah took a moment to calm himself before speaking, knowing two things with certainty. King Artaxerxes was on his side, and the ultimate authority for this project had come from God, not men. He didn't need to answer Sanballat's ridiculous charges. He simply said, "The God of heaven will give us success." Sanballat smirked. "Let's say for a moment that Tobiah and Geshem and I believe you, and that King Artaxerxes also believes that your motives are honorable. How do you expect to accomplish such a monumental task?" "One stone at a time." Sanballat laughed out loud, creating a ripple of insulting laughter from among his entourage. Even stone-faced Geshem, the Arab, laughed derisively along with the others. Tobiah the Ammonite, who seemed to shift moods to match Sanballat's like a chameleon, changing color, chuckled and rolled his eyes. Tobiah was the quietest of the three leaders, the least flamboyant, but Nehemiah knew from experience that sometimes the quiet ones were the most dangerous. "Are we to believe," Sanballat asked, "that you are a professional architect and builder, Nehemiah? Do you have qualifications that you have kept hidden from us?" "You'll see exactly how qualified I am when the wall is finished." "Where do you expect to find a workforce of skilled laborers?" Gershom asked, his tone as condescending as his expression. "The men of Judah will do the rebuilding." Nehemiah's comment caused more laughter, louder this time. "Your wall won't amount to much, with farmers and tradesmen doing all the work," Tobiah the Amorite said. "He's right," Sanballat added. "If you expect your wall to offer any protection, it has to be built correctly, not cobbled together." He turned his back on Nehemiah and addressed the district leaders again. "Your governor is wasting your time, your people's time. Their efforts would be better spent doing what they're qualified to do, which is growing wheat and barley and olives and herding sheep." Nehemiah held up his hands to halt the twittering laughter and insults that followed Sanballat's remarks. "Since you obviously don't believe we can accomplish this, what are you worried about? Why make the long journey here? Why try to discourage us from doing something you believe is impossible?" Sanballat finished his laughter with a cough and settled back in his seat, his hands folded on his broad belly. "As governor of the land beyond the river, it's my duty to warn you that the Persians will most certainly interpret your actions as rebellious." "Nonsense! You saw my letter of authorization from King Artaxerxes. Or did you fail to read it carefully?" Nehemiah looked directly at Geshem, who had barely given the document a glance. "My aides looked at it," Geshem said, "and they don't recall reading anything about fortifying Jerusalem." He was right. The letter didn't specifically say that, but in his appeal to King Artaxerxes, Nehemiah had made his intentions clear. "If it pleases the king, and if your servants has found favor in his sight, let them send me to the city in Judah where my fathers are buried, so I can rebuild it." King Artaxerxes had granted all of Nehemiah's requests. "Would you like to see the letter the king wrote to Asaph, keeper of the forest?" he asked. "In it, the king commands Asaph to give me timber to make beams for the gates and for the citadel near the temple and for the city wall." Sanballat didn't reply, turning to the council leaders again. Listen to me, gentlemen. Shalom, Rephaiah, Malchijah, we have worked together in the past, and I know that you have also worked closely with Tobiah. None of you is a fool. Surely none that you have had time to think about it. You realize the futility of this plan and the foolishness of the man who is leading you into such dangerous folly. Attempting to rebuild miles and miles of city wall is a tragic waste of time and manpower that could be put to better use during these difficult economic times. Nehemiah had heard enough. If your delegation's purpose is to mock and ridicule me and to undermine any work of mine, then I think your official visit here has come to an end. Good day. He would have walked out, but Sanballat rose from his seat to stop him. You forget that I ran the province of Judah before you arrived? Before you arrived out of nowhere, I could be of assistance to you. So could Tobiah, who knows this land and its people much better than you do. I haven't forgotten. The province of Judah became impoverished under your rule and the enormous taxes you imposed. I didn't cause the drought, Governor Nehemiah. I care about these people and have their best interest in mind, and you obviously don't. Tobiah rose to join the assault. Your decision affects the entire land beyond the river, including the province that I govern. Sanballat, Geshem, and I all have a share in what happens in Judah. We Judeans are God's servants, Nehemiah replied, and we will continue rebuilding the wall. But the three of you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. How dare you? Sanballat shouted. I dare because King Artaxerxes appointed me governor of Judah. I'm doing the work that he and my God gave me to do. You and anyone else who oppose me are opposing God. Your God spoke to you and told you to build? Tobiah mocked. You have some nerve. Who do you think you are? Moses the Messiah? Only they may claim to hear from our God. Tobiah turned to the high priest. Eliashib, are you and your fellow priests going to allow such blasphemy? Your governor just claimed to have direct revelation from God. Nehemiah didn't wait for Eliashib's reply. He walked towards the door, turning back to say, You are welcome to stay and enjoy the meal, my servants. My servants are prepared for you, but I have no more time to spare for you and your taunts. I have a job to do. The God I serve will give us success. He heard the anxious buzz of voices behind him as he strode from the room. His aide, Johanan, hurried out with him. You have insulted Governor Sanballat and the others, he whispered on the way down the hall. I've never seen him so angry. Well, I'm angry as well. He took advantage of my hospitality to mock and ridicule me and my work. He's a very powerful man. I'd watch my back if I were you. Nehemiah knew the danger of what he had just done, but he would admit to no one, not even his aides or his brothers, that he was afraid. In Persia, he had kept careful watch over the king's safety, never his own. Whenever he drank from King Artaxerxes' cup or tasted his food, Nehemiah always knew that it might be poisoned, that he might die protecting the king. The need for constant vigilance had been nerve-wracking at times, but now it was his life that might be threatened. The hatred he felt towards those three enemies was mutual. If they plotted to kill him, Nehemiah wondered if the work would proceed or if the people would be too fearful to continue. This visit won't be the end of their attempts to stop us, he told Johanan. It's just the beginning. They won't give up until we stop building, and I have no intentions of doing that. Ephraim and Anani caught up with him a few minutes later. That was a masterful performance, Ephraim said. You didn't back down 1 inch. It ended in a standoff, Nehemiah said. They aren't going to back down either. What next? Anani asked. What would you like us to do? Nehemiah halted in the hallway of his residence, very aware that from a safety standpoint, their home was not at all secure. We need to pray continually that the Almighty One will help us and that He will turn our enemies' insults back on their own heads. We are praying, Nehemiah, morning and evening. Good. And we are probably going to need weapons. Look into that for me, Anani. There may come a time when we'll need them. In the meantime, we'll need to remain alert day and night. Now let's get back to work. I've wasted enough time with these men. Chana watched as the builders stretched a taut level line across the top of the stones to make sure the new construction was straight and level. Using a plumb line is exactly the kind of precision work that I can do, she told her father. And I know I can do it much better than your clumsy laborers can. Sorting stones had been interesting at first, but now Chana wanted a new challenge. She hounded Abba every chance she got, trailing behind him at the worksite with the cord in her hand and the clay weight dangling from it. Just let me try it, Abba. I know I can do it. When he finally gave in, he stood at the bottom of the scaffolding while Chana climbed up for the first time, preparing to catch her if she fell. The construction was shaky and the climb precarious, but she hid her unease as she made her way to the top. The wall perched on top of such a steep slope that the height made her dizzy, but she got the hang of the job in no time. By the end of the week, Abby realized what a good eye she had and stopped objecting as she climbed up and down the scaffolding and crawled round on top of the 6-foot wide wall to make sure the builders kept it straight and true. She loved standing on a level row of freshly laid blocks to gaze out at the view of the Mishneh and the Judean hills beyond. Her sister Judith was also adept at climbing up and down the scaffolding, proving to be an expert at choosing just the right stone to jam inside the crevices between the larger ones to create a snug fit. The job that Sarah loved best was surveying the largest building blocks and finding ones that weren't too badly burnt or crumbled, then showing the workers which edges needed to be chiseled off to make the stones fit tightly together. Chana now heard the constant sound of chipping and chiseling and grinding and pounding, even in her sleep. Guys, this reminds me of being in the hospital. When you work in the hospital, especially when you work in like long-term care, where the lights, the call bells are constantly going off. Sometimes you end up going to sleep and hearing the call bells, chim, 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 hearing that sound even in your sleep. And those of us who are nurses or who are working in the hospital or nursing homes, we realize that this is so true. And just like Chana, he's hearing the sound of the construction site even in her sleep. And she slept better every night than she had in more than a year. This morning, Chana was halfway up the ladder of scaffolding with a plumb line in her hand when she heard shouting behind her. No! What? Stop! Where are you going? Get down from there! She turned to see Governor Nehemiah standing below her and quickly made sure her skirt was modest. Are you talking to me? She asked. Of course I am. What do you think you are doing up there? I'm checking the scores of stones to make sure they are plumb. No, 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 no. Get down from there and leave this area immediately. And you both need to leave too, he said, spotting Judith and Sarah. Why? Chana asked. Why? Nehemiah was already too outraged to speak. Chana didn't move from where she stood on the ladder. Because this is dangerous work. Women don't belong anywhere near here. We are very familiar with the dangers. We have been working here since the first day. Who is your site leader? He asked, glancing all around. Our father, Shalom Ben Halowish. I heard you say in your speech, Governor, that every section leader is responsible for choosing his own volunteers, and our father chose us. We have his permission to be here. Where is Shalom? I need to speak with him. And in the meantime, get down from there. Chana still didn't move. Nehemiah looked strong enough and angry enough to scoop her up in his brawny arms and carry her home once she did. Abba went to talk to Ephraim, then Akaliah about getting more timber. Sarah looked suitably frightened of Nehemiah, and so did Judith, who had stopped gathering stones and had come to stand near the foot of the scaffolding. Somebody go find him, Nehemiah commanded. Tell him I need to speak with him immediately. And the three of you go home. He planted his hand on Sarah's shoulder and gave her a little push. Chana scrambled down the ladder. Don't tell us what to do, Governor. This is our city too, our inheritance. I cannot allow this. What will people say when they come through the valley gate or visit me at my headquarters and see women working? I'm ordering you to go home where you belong. I don't suppose you know the story of Zelophehad's daughter, Chana asked, hands on her hips. It's in the Torah. The Almighty One said that daughters have a right to their father's inheritance if he has no sons. What are you talking about? You are not even making sense. He stood as if bracing for a fist fight. Chana wrapped her arms around the leg of the scaffolding, certain that he would throw her over his shoulder any minute and carry her home. Judith and Sarah, the cowards, slowly inched away from him, heading down the slope towards the gate. Why are you defying me? Defying convention and common sense? It is sheer, mule-headed stubbornness or what? Why won't you leave like any normal woman would and go home? His insults infuriated her, making his words spill out. I was betrothed to a man, Yitzhak ben Raphia. I know the story. He was murdered. Well, you obviously have no idea what it's like to lose someone you love, or what it's like to know that if only there had been a better protection, Yitzhak would be here. You are wrong. I do know both of those things. Then you should also know how hard it is not to be angry with God, how impossible it is at times to continue to believe in his goodness. Chana knew she was spilling thoughts that she had never shared with anyone, thoughts that she should keep to herself. But once she had opened a tiny window to her heart, she couldn't stop. I go to the temple and worship him because it is expected of me. And sometimes I succeed in believing in a loving God, but just as often, I don't. This morning we sang the words, His love endures forever, and I couldn't see it. There is so much rage still seething inside me that I could murder Yitzhak's killers with my own two hands and set their houses ablaze with their families and little ones inside. And I know that my hatred isn't pleasing to God, and has no place in my heart when I stand in his house to worship. But what can I do with it? Where can I go? Nehemiah didn't reply. He stared at her as if stunned by her outburst. Chana unwound her arm from the scaffolding and took a step forward. The men who killed Yitzhak were never found, never brought to justice, and so I'm pouring all of my rage into building this wall. I know it won't bring Yitzhak back, but it might keep another killer out. It might spare another woman the grief of losing someone she loves. He was quiet for a long moment before saying, Even so, I can't allow it. You are a woman. Thank you for noticing, but you can't stop me. They stood toe to toe, neither one of them backing down. She had to look up to see him, the top of her head level with her chin. All of the workers watched and listened. Nehemiah was the governor and she a mere woman. Reasons enough for her to submit and obey him and go home. She wouldn't do it. This isn't the end of this discussion, he finally said. He turned his back and strode away, passing Judith and Sarah on his way to the gate. Chana watched him go, her legs too shaky to climb the scaffolding again that day. And as we read this book, guys, there is there is a raging debate going on in our society today about the definition of a woman. I have never in my life seen anything more absolutely ridiculous than the nonsense that I see going on in our society today. For somebody to have the gall, to have the audacity to question my womanhood, I find it to be more than just atrocious. For men to play dress up, put on some lipstick, put two earrings in their ears, put on a dress, and say, well, here I am. I am a woman now because I put on a dress. But when I put on trousers, I'm not a man. Don't wish to be, don't care to be. I embrace the way I was born, and I embrace the fact that I am a woman. And if the powers that be wanted me to be a man, then I would have been given the appendages, the genetic structure, and the hormonal sufficiencies of a man. But the powers that be wanted me to be a woman, and I embrace my womanhood and everything that comes with it. And when I hear this, not to go off topic, but when I hear this conversation, this debate going on, I cringe because I'm like, what is the state of mind that men are in this time of the day? What is their state of mind really? Even if I put if I get fur, a cat's fur, and I put it on a dog, the dog is still a dog. What does the fur have to do with the dog genetically being a dog? But humans, we are just so destructive. We are so destructive in our own society. And then we say, oh, the society is this, the society is... It is this way because we allow the foolery to continue. How in the world do women find comfort in men being awarded Women of the Year? These things are just so... It is more than just atrocious, I tell you, my friend. These things just... I cannot understand how people who claim to be intellectuals, claim to be smart people, would suddenly decide that a woman is not a woman. They are what they call us cis women, chest feeders, baby carriers. The audacity of coming up with these insulting terms. And yet, when people come up with insulting terms and use it against them, you are bigoted, they call you all kinds of names in the book. But they have the audacity to be calling us women chest feeders and baby carriers and all this nonsense. But I tell you, no matter how much lipstick, no matter how many awards, no matter how many dresses they put on, a man is still a freaking man. And if you cut off your penis, you are still a man. You fold it inside and make it into what you call a manufactured vagina, you are still a man. You could have taken estrogen, from today until next week, until next year, until the end of... You are still a man. And if you were not a man, you would not have had to do all these things to become a woman. Women don't have to go cut off penises and turn them into vaginas. Women don't have to go and take testosterone and take estrogen and hormones to become a woman. Women were born with this capacity. So, win some what's up. So I see this topic going on and on. I go over TikTok and there are people having a whole live telling people to convince them that a transgender man is not a woman. Really? What kind of convincing do you need? Men are talking about, oh, they can't wait for the day. They can't wait for the day when a man is able to give birth. Us women wish we never had to be prodded and stretched open to deliver life into this world. Wish we never had to. Because these very same men use it against us. They say, oh, you have children already, you lost your virtue. You can't get a high quality man because you have already been betrothed, you have already had children. Your belly already stretched, your JJ already stretched up to give birth. They use it against us. And men are talking about they can't wait for the day when a man can give birth. When am I going to give the birth through? Where exactly is he going to give the birth through? The shape of a man's body. A man has what is called an android shape in his pelvic area. It is chiseled that way because he's not expected to give birth. A woman is not chiseled that way because a woman's body is built to expand for the growth of a fetus and for the delivery of life into the world. A man has a scrotum, testicles, that hangs from his penis. And that serves his purpose to make sperms and semen, to store sperms and keep them viable to fertilize a woman's eggs. What about that can't men appreciate and understand? That is your purpose. Your purpose is not to give birth. And that is why your body isn't made to give birth. Your android shape would shatter. The android shape of your pelvis would absolutely shatter if you are to give birth. I'm not even talking about that. Let's not even get there. As a nurse, let me tell you some of the things that would happen to you if you, as a man, were to claim that you are going to benefit from a womb transplant and you were going to be able to give birth. A womb transplant is not a heart transplant. It is not a kidney transplant. And people who get organ transplants, they have to live on anti-rejection medications for the rest of their lives so that their bodies do not reject the transplanted organ. Imagine a womb being transplanted into a man's abdominal cavity. A womb doesn't go by itself. It goes with fallopian tubes. It goes with ovaries. All right? Where in your android shape are they going to implant that womb? How is that womb going to expand? That's just one question. But before we get to that, how is your body going to treat this womb? How is your body going to treat it? It's going to treat it like an infection. Your body is going to reject it. Can your body handle the infection that is going to be caused by that? Can your body handle all of these artificial hormones that they're going to be pumping into your body? I doubt it. Your body isn't made to accommodate pregnancy. Do you know all the things that happens to a woman's body when she's pregnant? She shares the hormones of her body with her fetus. She shares the blood of her body with her fetus. Her heart pumps more blood because she got to get blood for the baby. Enough blood for her, enough blood for the baby. So tell me, in all your genius, how are you going to compensate for all of that? If you are a man hoping to get a womb so you can carry a child. These things are so ridiculous. And the fact that they are being entertained by people who are supposed to be smart, it is absolutely ridiculous. I saw somebody ask a doctor recently, can men become pregnant? And the doctor, in all his wisdom, said yes. Like, what? A man cannot get pregnant. We have to accept our roles in life, accept our roles in society. A woman was put on the earth to get pregnant and carry baby, and her body has been fashioned for that task. A man was put on the earth to work hard, to make sperms that will fertilize the eggs of a woman, and his body is fashioned for that. Let us move right along. So here Nehemiah is telling Chana and her sisters to go home. Because, from their patriarchal point of view, women are not to be outside of the house working as hard as men. They are supposed to be home washing, cooking, and cleaning. So Nehemiah was trying to impose this law on Chana and her sisters. But these were determined women. They were determined. And Chana had a purpose that arose from the pain she had felt after losing Yitzhak to the thieves who had broke into Jerusalem. Nehemiah still trembled with fury as he marched through the valley gate and back to his headquarters inside the city. He could find Shalom and tell him exactly what he thought of his imprudent, disrespectful daughter. What kind of a father couldn't control his children? Shalom certainly didn't deserve to be the district leader of Jerusalem if he was too weak to stop his daughter from pushing him around. Nehemiah reached the shade of the rush-covered roof that served as his field headquarters. But the only person there was his brother Hanani. "Where's Ephraim?" he asked. The girl said her father had gone to talk to him. "I don't know. I haven't seen Ephraim since this morning." "Shalom ben Ashoesh and his daughters, do you know them?" Nehemiah asked. "I know Shalom, leader of the half-district of Jerusalem, and I'm aware that he has daughters, but I don't know them." "Why?" "There are 3 of them, and they are working on the wall. I saw them myself a few minutes ago." "Women? Moving stones and climbing the scaffolding and using a plumb line? Really?" The fact that Hanani was barely able to hide his amusement made Nehemiah angrier still. "Servant David is in the house. How are you doing, my brother? Welcome. Our enemies are already mocking us. I'm just thankful they didn't see those women where they are when they made their state visit. Shalom's section is right behind the valley gate. It's outrageous." When Hanani took a step back, Nehemiah knew he had to cool his temper. He grabbed the water dipper and plunged it into the jar, gulped down a mouthful of water, filled the dipper a second time, and poured the water over his head. That woman had made him angrier than he had been in a long time. "You obviously have no idea what it's like to lose someone you love," she had accused him. But Nehemiah knew exactly how she felt. Even though the man who had killed his father had been brought to justice, Nehemiah's rage was still there, the same as hers. Yet it had never occurred to him that it might displease God to worship at the temple while hoarding that rage. And as much as he hated to admit it, he understood what motivated her to work on the wall. Hadn't he done the same thing, using his anger as fuel to rise to the position of cupbearer and ensure the king's safety? "I'm pouring all of my rage into building this wall," she told him. Wasn't he doing the same thing, letting anger drive him to rebuild Jerusalem's wall? Nehemiah pushed a few drawings around on his work table, remembering her confession that she was angry with God. Nehemiah was angry too, if he was honest with himself. God had protected his parents, and so he had taken over for him, trying to protect everyone he loved. Then another thought occurred to him. What if Sanballat and Tobiah were right and God hadn't ordered him to rebuild the walls? What if he had petitioned the king and obtained the decree by the sheer force of his own stubborn will? He quickly pushed that thought aside, just like the scrolls. Of course, he had heard from God. The Almighty One's hand was upon him. You know what infuriated me the most? Nehemiah asked his brother. She refused to stop working and go home, even when I commanded her to. It was as if she was taunting me. Anani covered his mouth to hide his smile, pretending to smooth his beard. She must be quite a demon woman if she made you lose your temper. You stayed so calm and serene when Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem taunted you. I'd sooner stood up to Sanballat any day. He is more rational than she is. What does this woman who dares to defy the governor of Judah look like? He didn't want to tell Anani that she was annoyingly attractive, the kind of woman men wanted to shelter and protect. He had noticed how pretty she and her sisters were the night he had eaten dinner at their home, but he had forced himself to ignore them, aware that it was wrong to gaze at women that way. He hadn't wanted to stare today either, but he couldn't help noticing the way her clothing had clung to the curves of her body in the heat. And that's another thing, Anani. These women are surely a distraction to the men who are working, who are working on the construction. I see. Anani was still trying to hide his smile. I guess that answers my question. Since you think this is so funny, I'm going to leave it up to you to take care of this problem. Me? Why? Because I have a wall to build. I can't waste any more time on this problem. Find Shalom and tell him to find his daughters and send them home. They can't work on the wall ever again. All right, that is the end of chapter 24. I really don't want to read on to chapter 25, and I'm going to. Chapter 25. All of her father's pleas and demands couldn't change Chana's mind. Tired as she was from her day's labors, she continued to argue with Abba as they sat eating their evening meal. Determined to return to the wall tomorrow. We are doing real work, Abba. You know we are, and we are good at what we do. The other laborers are used to having us work alongside them. They have accepted us and are grateful for our help. You can't tell us to stop now just because Nehemiah has a problem with it. He's the governor, Chana. He's our leader. We need to respect the leaders God has given us. Even when they are wrong, where does it say in the Torah that women can't build a wall? Nowhere. This is just his own ridiculous bias. Why won't you explain to him that he is wrong? Chana, I think we all need time for our tempers to cool. Tomorrow is preparation day for the Sabbath, and I think it would be better if you girls stayed home and cooked our meal. Working on the wall will stop early tomorrow to give the men time to return home to their families. And you'll need to prepare extra portions to feed any of our workers who live too far away to go home. And after the Sabbath ends, what then? Chana asked. We'll talk about it when the time comes and not before. She agreed to stay home and help prepare the Sabbath meal with her sisters and the new servants they had hired. But I'm going back after the Sabbath, she told Judith and Sarah the next morning as she shoveled ash from the earth to begin cooking. The fine dust turned her hands gray. I'm not giving up my work on the wall, she said. I love working too, Judith said as she grounded grain into flour with her hand mill. But I don't want to make Abba angry. I don't like fighting with him. I don't either, Sarah said. She had already been to the king's pool and back, carrying the heavy jar of water uphill so they could cook. We can still help out by feeding Abba's workers. That's a huge contribution, isn't it? Of course, but the new servants can easily do that. You loved building the wall as much as I did, didn't you? We shouldn't have to quit. Chana broke a handful of twigs into pieces and laid them on the warm coals, then blew on them to start the fire. Nehemiah is a bully, throwing his weight around and coercing Abba to give in. The governor shouldn't have that much power. We are not breaking any laws by working. I'm not quitting until he shows me a law that says I have to. Later that morning, Chana had just finished baking all the bread they would need for the Sabbath when a messenger arrived from Malkijah's house. My lord asked that you please join him for Sabbath dinner this evening in his Jerusalem home, he told Chana. All four of us? He asked. Their meal preparations were well underway, and she wondered what they would do with all the fish they had purchased in the marketplace. Master Malkijah very kindly asked that you come alone this time, miss. Chana didn't know what to say. Sarah nudged her with her elbow. Tell him, of course, you'll come, silly. Abba must have told Malkijah that you have agreed to a betrothal, Judith added. Did I agree? Chana asked. She was still so angry about being ordered around by the governor that she barely remembered what she had said. God, what's up? Build that wall. God, how are you doing, my sister? So good to see you. The day's preparations helped Chana take her mind off the wall and the governor's unreasonable demands for a while, and she was in a good mood. Chana asked, did I agree? She was still so angry about being ordered around by the governor that she barely remembered. Yes, when you were trying to convince Abba to let us work on the wall, Judith said. How come you have forgotten? The messenger waited for her reply. Chana drew a steadying breath. Please tell Malkijah that I will be happy to dine with him tonight. Very well. I will return before sundown to escort you to his house, miss. The day's preparation helped Chana take her mind off the wall and the governor's unreasonable demands for a while, and she was in a good mood that evening when the servant arrived to escort her up the hill to Malkijah's Jerusalem home. But he lived close to the governor's residence, and Chana's anger boiled all over again as she walked past it. Had the governor enlisted Malkijah's help in convincing her to give up her work? The thought infuriated her. Just in time, she remembered that she was Malkijah's guest. She needed to set aside her anger and be gracious to her host, who stood waiting at the door to greet her. Chana, welcome to my home away from home. I'm so pleased that you could join me tonight. Most of the houses in Jerusalem had been built quickly by the returning exiles, with little thought of making them beautiful. But Malkijah's house was an exception, tastefully and expertly built. It might be small, but it was as luxurious as his country estate. The interior walls were paneled with cedar, not merely plastered. The stone floors had been laid in pleasing designs and covered with expensive imported rugs. Malkijah had a staff of servants. To wait on him, and Chana recognized some of them from his estate in Beth Hakerem, including the young girl named Nava. It's nearly sunset, Malkijah said, breaking into her thoughts. Will you do me the honor, Chana, of lighting the Sabbath lights? She did, reciting the blessing and thanking God for the command to rest on the Sabbath. When she and Malkijah sat down at his lavish spread table, she was surprised to discover that she was his only guest. Malkijah held up the 2 loaves of bread and recited the blessing, then did the same for the wine. By the time he finished and they started eating the first course, Chana could no longer keep quiet. May I ask you a question, Malkijah? Of course. His smile was so warm and genuine. She hated herself for suspecting him of conspiring with the governor. But she had to know. Are you aware that my sisters and I have been helping Abba rebuild his section of the wall? He grinned, his ebony eyes sparkling in the lamplight. Yes, all of Jerusalem is talking about it. What are they saying? He took a sip of wine and set down his cup. Opinions vary. Most people think it's outrageous. A few admire you for being so strong and patriotic, and they compare you to Queen Esther. Of which opinion are you? Both. I agree that your actions are outrageous and probably very dangerous. I was so concerned for your safety when I first heard that you were scaling ladders and climbing scaffolding that I nearly went there myself to ask you to stop. Then I realized that your father would be just as concerned for your safety and would never put you or your sisters in danger. What bothers me the most is that people are gossiping about you, thinking ill of you when they don't know you or your motives for helping. Our new governor is among them. So I've heard. On the other hand, you have spirit, Chana, and I like that. I would be bored with the wife. I would be bored with a wife who never tried anything new or was too frightened to leave the house or had no opinions of her own. Then you and Governor Nehemiah are certainly very different. I'm glad you don't feel threatened by my outrageous actions and strong opinions. And thank you for having the courage to invite me here, even though the entire city is gossiping about me. I didn't invite you here tonight to talk about your work on the wall, Chana. He looked away for a moment, as if suddenly shy, the bump on his crooked nose more noticeable in profile. Your father told me that you have agreed to marry me. Your sister Judith had been right. Abba had kept his side of the bargain, allowing her to work, and now she would have to keep hers. Anna suddenly felt shy. Yes, I have agreed. I'm very pleased to hear that, he said with a broad grin. I promise to make your happiness among my highest goals in life. I hope I can make you feel happy too. You already did by saying yes. Now, what I hoped we could settle tonight is a date when your father and I can sign a ketubah, and that we can also decide when the wedding will be. There's no point in a long waiting period between the two occasions, is there? I already have a home prepared for you. A sudden memory brought a rush of grief. Yitzhak had been killed while preparing a home for her. She looked away from Malkesia, staring down at her hands, scratched and blistered from her work. No, there's no point, but I would like to finish building the wall before we are married. If you would allow me to, I'll send a dozen servants to take your place and build it for you. But I have a feeling you wouldn't like that. You are right, I wouldn't. He gave a crooked grin. May I send just a few servants then? Or you'll finish sooner. Chana felt a rising sense of panic at the thought of losing control over her life. She couldn't recall feeling like a fish snared in a net when she became engaged to Yitzhak. But she had been in love with him, and she didn't love Malkesia yet. She wondered if she ever would. I enjoy the work very much, she said carefully. I don't want to stop, and thank you for the offer, but I don't need help. He leaned towards her, suddenly serious. I know, but I need your help, Chana. I discovered that I did on the night you visited my home in Beth Hakerem, the night that young man broke in. You took time to listen to him and figure out what happened. My wife used to do the same thing. Rebecca watched over our servants and listened to them, watched out for their needs and protected them. I fear no one is doing that, especially now that I'm away from home and working in Jerusalem. And I think you would do the job wonderfully well. You have a good heart and a fierce spirit. I know you would be a valuable asset to me and to our home, and that we would work very well together. Was it mere flattery, or did Malkesia really believe that? He looked sincere. Chana had seen how well ordered his estate was, and she wondered if she really would find purpose and a place in it. What I've been thinking, he continued, is that we could sign the betrothal now, and the wedding would take place after the wall is finished. Our governor seems convinced that we can complete the work within a matter of months, not years. Chana knew that a betrothal was just as binding as a marriage. She would be considered Malchisia's wife, and he would replace Abba as the one who made decisions for her. Would you want, would you make me stop building if we became betrothed? Malchisia laughed. I wouldn't know how to stop you, nor would I want to try. He smiled his crooked smile and reached across the table to take her hand. Chana, I promise I'll never force you to do anything that you don't want to do. She had another thought and drew a steady breath. Will you stand up for me now? Can I continue working? Governor Nehemiah is pressing Abba, trying to force him to send Judith and Sarah and me back home. But working on the wall has lifted that horrible load of grief I've been carrying for the past year. I can't explain how free and how happy it has made me to work alongside my father and accomplish something as solid and enduring as that wall. Am I making any sense? You want me to use my influence to convince Governor Nehemiah that he is wrong? Yes. Would you? You said that being married meant working together. And if we are betrothed, then you get to decide what I can and cannot do, not the governor. If it would make you happy, Chana, then yes, I'll do what I can to convince him. Her misgivings vanished as she twined her fingers into his. Then I want to make you happy too, Malchisia. We can become engaged as soon as you and Abba can arrange it. Their betrothal took place before a small gathering of family members, friends, and colleagues of Abba and Malchisia. Thankfully, the governor had not been invited, but the high priest, Eliashib, had come. Malchisia insisted on holding the celebration in his Jerusalem house so his servants could prepare all the food. Chana wasn't sure how he had done it, but Malchisia had kept his promise and used his influence to make certain that she and her sisters could continue working on the wall. She felt restless as she listened to one of the city elders read the ketubah that Abba and Malchisia had agreed upon. The two men had haggled good-natured over the dowry and the bride price, making Chana feel like a melon in the marketplace. Why you think she felt like a melon in the marketplace? Because those ketubas and the dowry meant that she felt like she was being sold, like she was a piece of property that was being sold. And those are the reasons why women have fought so hard to get rid of these archaical laws that require dowry and require you to be sold and require somebody to be man and lord over you, to tell you what you can and cannot do. Ridiculous, isn't it? The complete contract would be as binding as marriage vows. Only a divorce or a death could end it. When Chana and Yitzhak had celebrated their betrothal, she had been so overjoyed and excited she hadn't been able to hold back her tears. The jittery unease she felt about the ritual this time had no logical explanation, nothing she could name as a reason why. Malchisia was a good man who lived according to the Torah. He treated his servants well. He could amply provide for her, and he had told Chana that he wouldn't try to change her or force her to do anything she didn't want to do. He said he liked her spirit. Her life had been suspended after Yitzhak died. Maybe now she would begin living again. She watched as Malchisia and Abba signed the ketubah before all the witnesses. Then Malchisia poured his finest wine into a cup and offered it to her. Chana accepted it from his hand and drank it. They were betrothed. Shouts of joy and wishes for their happiness filled the room. Malchisia broke into a wide grin, and Chana smiled in return. Abba seemed as pleased as Malchisia, and yet, Chana still wondered if she was doing the right thing. Was it guilt for trying to be happy again without Yitzhak? for being unfaithful to his memory and to the vows she made to him at their betrothal. Malchijah lifted up his cup of wine as he addressed all the people. Please help yourself to the food that my servants have prepared, or I should say, our servants. They are yours as well, Chana. We are so happy that you could celebrate this wonderful event with us. Enjoy. Nervous tension stole Chana's appetite. She couldn't eat. She stood aside to watch as their guests gathered around the platters of food and filled their cups with Marquis's famous wine. When she felt a gentle tug on her sleeve, she turned to see Nava, the servant girl. Congratulations, my lady, she said shyly. I wish you many happy years with my master. Thank you, Nava. I hope. But the girl scurried away as Marquisia approached. Can I take you away for just a moment, Chana? He asked. I believe our guests are all occupied at the moment. She followed Marquisia out to the small balcony with a view of the Mount of Olives across the valley and the star-filled sky above their heads. How are you faring with all of this? He asked. Everything is beautiful, Marquisia. Your servants did a wonderful job. May I share something personal with you? Of course. Throughout this process, I have sometimes felt a little guilty. There's no other way to describe it. I felt as if I was being unfaithful to my wife's memory. You may have felt the same. He quickly went on before Chana could respond. But tonight, I realized something. If it had been the other way around, if I had died instead of Rebecca, I would have wanted nothing but happiness for her future. I wouldn't have wanted her to grieve for the rest of her life. And I realized that it doesn't tarnish her memory or my love for her in any way for me to marry you and be happy with you. Am I making sense? Yes, and thank you for sharing that with me. The fact that he understood and had the same mixed feelings as she did somehow eased her mind. Come, we'd better get back, he said. He took her hand as they rejoined the party, and Chana found that her appetite had returned. She was able to enjoy the celebration and the blessings and the congratulations everyone had bestowed on her. Later that evening, as the party wound down, Chana went in search of her father and took a wrong turn, ending up in a passageway near the servants' quarters. As she retraced her steps, she overheard a conversation between the high priest and the city elder who had read the ketubah earlier that evening. What a shrewd move on Malchisia's part to marry Shalom's daughter, Eliashib said. This marriage will make him even more powerful than he already is. Yes, and he was wise to move as quickly as he did before another suitor had a chance to marry the girl and claim Shalom's district. Malchijah is a very cunning politician. You can be sure that everything he does serves his own best interest. Chana's knees went weak. She couldn't move. Was this why Malchijah had pushed so hard for the betrothal? Had he been charming and attentive simply as a means to marry her and inherit Abba's district? She felt duped, manipulated. She had made a terrible mistake in agreeing to marry him. And now it was too late to change her mind. Why are you hiding back there? Abba asked when he found her. You look tired, my angel. Come, let's find your sisters and go home. Chana followed them as if in a dream as they walked down the hill. Abba didn't notice her tears until they reached home. What's wrong? He asked. I hope those are tears of joy and not regret. I've been so blind, Chana said, wiping them away. I believed all the charming things Malchijah said about being well suited for each other and finding contentment together. But I overheard the high priest talking tonight and realized how naive I had been. Our betrothal was nothing more than a grab for power. Malchijah is marrying me so he can inherit your district. That's why he pushed so hard for a ketubah, isn't it? Chana, calm down, my angel. Malchijah would never commit to a lifetime with you if he wasn't taken with your charms. But, but what if it was all an act? Eliashib said that marrying me was a shrewd political move on Malchijah's part. Of course it was, and a shrewd move on my part as well. An alliance with Malchijah benefits us as much as it does him. He's one of the wealthiest men in the province. You will never need to work another day in your life with him as your husband. Think of your children, Chana, and what they'll stand to gain. And if this match happens to benefit Malchijah, increase his land or his wealth, or his power? She asked bitterly. Yes, or his power. Then it's an excellent arrangement for all of us. Listen, you're a smart woman, Chana. You know how and why marriages are arranged. Every father in Judah tries to make the best possible match for his daughter, one that will benefit her and her family. Why are you surprised by this? I don't know. Because my betrothal to Yitzhak was different. He didn't care about power. He loved me. I was foolish to believe that Malchijah was the same, that he was interested in me, not in what he stood to gain by marrying me. Listen, I believe that Yitzhak did love you, my angel, but he also knew very well that that if he married you, he would become the leader of Jerusalem someday. He would inherit both halves of the district, my half and his father's half. He talked about it all the time, remember? He used to brag that he would be king and your children would be little princes. For a second time that evening, all of Chana's strength melted away. She had to sit down. That was a joke. Perhaps he treated it as a joke, but Yitzhak was very aware of the power and position he would gain by marrying you. He wanted those things just as much as Malchijah does. The two men are no different in that respect, except that Malchijah will only inherit half of the district of Jerusalem. She covered her face and lowered her head to her lap. How could she have been so stupid, letting her love for Yitzhak blind her to his other motives? Chana remembered all the months she had wasted, grieving and mourning for him, how she had nearly stopped living, and she felt like a fool. And she was an even bigger fool for trusting Malchijah, falling for his charm. And his sympathy, believing him when he had insisted he understood how she felt. Abba was still pleading with her to understand, but she didn't want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it anymore, Abba. Please, I need to be alone. She was betrothed to Malchijah. Their union was as binding as marriage. Chana couldn't dissolve the contract without forfeiting everything, including her father's good name and reputation. The scandal of a divorce would hurt Judith and Sarah too, and Chana would sacrifice any chance of getting married and having a family. She was going to become Malchijah ben Rechab's wife, his pathway to more power, and she could do nothing to stop it. That's the end of chapter 25, my friends. And that is the end of the reading for today. When we come back tomorrow morning, we will continue the reading of the book On This Foundation, written by Lynn Austin. We will continue reading chapter 26. Let's find out what happened to Nava. Nava is very determined. She's very strong-willed. She is determined, and I don't know if she is going to go against her father's will or Malchijah's expectations and divorce him. We don't know that yet, but we are going to be reading to find out. So join me again tomorrow morning when we will continue the reading of On This Foundation by Lynn Austin. For those of you who are just coming into the live, I want to say thank you so much for coming. I sincerely appreciate everyone who has turned up for the reading each morning. But that's going to be it for now for today, my friends. Until next time, this is Trev from Trev Essence. where your journey matters. Have yourselves a great Easter Saturday, my friends, and we will talk later.